Part 16. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 157. Chapter 153 Drastic Changes. A staff officer of General Belt immediately thought of a possibility after receiving this situation. For fear of being delayed, he immediately said, "They want to flank us at the T-junction." As soon as the staff officer finished speaking, another staff officer jumped out and objected, "Impossible. If they attack us from that position, they will also accidentally injure their own people. They are not humans. Accidental injuries are fine as long as they don't hit the heart, but we humans are different." Remember the domain name of this website: Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. Two staff officers were arguing, and another staff officer did not speak, but looked at General Bird, who was in charge. "Luo Guang, what do you think?" General Bird felt that there was no need for the Red Claw troops to intervene in this situation, but it seemed that his men would not be able to win for a while, so he asked Luo Guang what he thought. Luo Guang has been studying and thinking, trying to learn how to command his men to fight from this mission. When General Bird asked him, he expressed his thoughts and said, "Is it possible that they will fight with you, bayonets? In this case, those mindless World War II zombies can also come in handy, right?" "Yes, it is indeed very possible." During World War II, bayonet fighting was also a very important tactic. The staff officer who had not interrupted until now heard Luo Guang's words, and his eyes lit up, thinking that this was indeed possible. General Bird said the same thing, and it can be used to deal with our two bulky shield soldiers. If the mobile shield as a team is solved, it will affect the speed of our advancement. Luo Guang's opinion is very likely. It is also a pincer attack, and the threat of close bayonet combat is even higher to the Prussian soldiers. Although they chatted for several words, due to the presence of the two shield soldiers, they did not advance very fast, so General Belt's order was not late and was successfully conveyed to the front-line combatants. "Fix bayonets." The front-line commander received the reminder from the rear headquarters and immediately ordered. Although bayonet battles are rare in modern warfare, in line with the principle that it can be used but cannot be used without it, the G36 assault rifle is still equipped with a bayonet holder, which can be equipped with various adapted bayonet weapons. The full length of the STG-44 assault rifle is 940 mm, while the full length of the G36 assault rifle with the butt extended is 988 mm. There is not much difference between the two, but they are very important in bayonet combat. But because the bodies of World War II zombies are more resistant to beatings, and there is only one fatal part, but that is the crystallized heart, so generally speaking, World War II zombies will have an advantage in bayonet combat. The front-line combatants swallowed, clenched the weapons in their hands, and slowly approached the intersection. Still a few meters away, the enemy never launched another attack, seemingly waiting for the best opportunity to break into the ranks of Prussian soldiers within a second. The two shield soldiers did not rush to move forward. They stopped, and after confirming the position of the enemy's body on the ground, they tilted their shields 45 degrees to the left and right respectively. Later, they could complete the turn while protecting their teammates. Aiming at both sides of the T intersection. The person behind the shield soldier took out a grenade and, under the cover of his teammates, threw it into both sides of the intersection through simple geometry. There was a rush of running, and several World War II zombies rushed out. They were dealt with by the Prussian soldiers who were responsible for covering them. Then the Prussian soldiers took action immediately with the sound of grenades exploding, rushing in. He went to the center of the intersection and started attacking both sides of the intersection. However, the actions of the World War II zombies were all figured out by Luo Guang and General Bird's staff, but they relied on the open steel plates, so not one of the World War II zombies was hit by the fragments produced by the grenades, and they were ready to quickly launch a counterattack. For a time, both sides had strong shields. The staff officers who saw this situation couldn't help but regret that they thought the soldiers did not need to carry powerful weapons. The corridors on both sides are much wider. If there is only one shield soldier, it can only block a small half of the corridor, which also gives the enemy room to throw grenades. And if thrown into the middle of an intersection, it can cause huge damage to a large number of Prussian soldiers. This gives those World War II zombies who cannot produce more weapons and ammunition a reason to use old-fashioned grenades. Then the Prussian soldiers began to suffer casualties. They knew that they could no longer let the other side throw grenades casually, so the front-line commander immediately arranged 2 light machine guns to suppress them. The medics dragged the wounded back for treatment, while the remaining combatants use grenades and give the other party a courtesy. However, the commander was still a step slower. Those irrational World War II zombies were running over like mad dogs. Taking advantage of the chaos caused by the grenade just now, they were already very close to the 2 shield soldiers who were a little stunned by the grenade. The shield soldiers have weapons, which are placed behind the shield. They were officially unveiled in 1999. The MP7 submachine gun currently being trialed by Prussia uses 4.6 times 30 mm bullets that have a longer range than the 9 mm parabellum bullets. It has an effective range, moderate power, and effectively provides sufficient penetration. It also takes into account the advantages of low recoil. It is a very good bullet. However, because the bullets are quite special, this gun has not been officially put into service yet, so there are not many bullets issued, but it is enough for the 2 shield soldiers to buy some adjustment time for the teammates behind them. Unfortunately, because of the heavy helmets on their heads, the shield soldiers' vision was not good, and they could only slightly block the steps of the World War II zombies. The 2 sides eventually collided with each other and a close-range battle occurred. When a World War II zombie holding a bayonet used those brainless teammates to attract the attention of the shield soldiers, he touched the shield. Seeing that the shield soldier's weapon moved to the side, he immediately bypassed the shield, pounced on the tall and strong shield soldier, opened the shield soldier's mask, and stabbed him with a bayonet. The battle line and team formation became a mess. The front line commander's orders were no longer suitable. Others did not execute them regardless of everything, but chose to start counter-attacking on the spot. The Prussian soldiers picked up their weapons and started to fight back. Because the enemy would only die if their hearts were attacked, they all insisted on attacking the hearts of the World War II zombies. Fortunately, most of the World War II zombies in close combat were brainless types, so they did not specifically defend their weaknesses, but they fought fiercely and were not afraid of being injured, which made those Prussian soldiers very uncomfortable. However, the Prussian soldiers were still quite elite after all, and they quickly changed their fighting style, holding a pistol in their left hand to assist in the attack. As long as they could make the opponent fall into a stiff state during close combat, they could kill him with one shot with a pistol. Using a bayonet to attack the crystal heart might fail to pierce due to the problem of force, but pistol bullets were different, and the penetration of pistol bullets was weak, so there was no need to worry too much about piercing the enemy and accidentally injuring friendly forces. A shield soldier was killed, and another shield soldier quickly retreated, raised his gun and shot the rational World War II zombie on his teammate, successfully solving the enemy, but he lost sight of the other and became the target of another World War II zombie, and the enemy broke through the defense through the gap in his heavy armor. The shield soldier with very heavy armor on his body could not react, and without the cover of his teammates, he suffered the same treatment as the former. The commander of the World War II zombies felt that the victory was already decided, and immediately sent out other people, intending to rely on close combat to make up for the gap in the quality and quantity of weapons between his side and the enemy. However, the opponent misjudged their advantage in combat. Following Luo Guang's reminder, the Prussian soldiers no longer only aimed at the enemy's heart to attack. They weakened the combat effectiveness of the World War II zombies by breaking their arms and twisting their necks with joint techniques, and then the Prussian soldiers could more easily find opportunities to smash the enemy's crystal heart. More World War II zombies rushed up with bayonets, but the light machine gunner had found a suitable position to hit the World War II zombies that poured into the intersection head-on. The two light machine guns were not used to lead the charge before, and the World War II zombie commander misjudged the weapon structure of the Prussian soldiers and made a wrong decision. The front-line commander had no time to report the situation. He led everyone to fight and solve the World War II zombies that were close to him. The Prussian team, which originally consisted of 24 people, was left with less than 7 people, standing at the intersection, waiting for support to arrive. According to the plan, when the first batch of death squads was about to reach the corridor, the second batch would set off and prepare to meet with the first team and split into two groups. But at this time, the number of people in the first team was not enough to advance again, so General Belt temporarily changed the plan and let the two groups of people set off at the same time, and directly replaced the first batch of death squads. Those who survived were all valuable assets of the army. The initial corridor had no cover, so the death squad was needed, but after the T-junction, the Prussian soldiers could already pry open the steel door on the wall with a crowbar and use the steel plate as a cover. In the temporary command center of the Prime Minister's office, General Belt exhaled. After enduring this corridor without a cover, the next step was relatively simple. He could use enough throwing objects to suppress the enemy and just clear a batch of ammunition stocks. Thank you, Luo Guang, fortunately you reminded us, otherwise the death squad might have died in vain. Belt thanked Luo Guang for reminding him of the bayonet battle. Luo Guang did not reply with a polite word, but asked, "Are there many World War II zombies in this underground fortress?" General Belt looked at his staff and asked them with his eyes how many World War II zombies they estimated. According to the estimation of the size of the fortress and the food storage in the food warehouse, there are at least 6,500 people, but according to the battle situation in Berlin that year, there may be fewer or more. The staff officer in charge of data analysis replied. Luo Guang felt that the second half of the sentence was nonsense, but this was also added by the other party for rigor, so he did not say anything, but just silently recalled the previous battle and the current situation of the Prussian soldiers. "Luo, do you think something is wrong?" Tanya asked. Lion's brain is very flexible, and he immediately said, "The number of enemies appearing now is wrong." "That's right, let's not talk about the previous situation between me and Tanya. From the current situation, don't you think the enemy is equal to the number of soldiers we sent out? It may be a step defense, and there are more people setting up positions behind," the staff officer said. General Belt also nodded. "If it's defense, then what is their defense goal? I remember they can speak German. What did they say at that time?" "I don't know. And most of what they said were those NC sentences. In addition to the step-by-step defense, they may also be sent to implement certain plans, but no matter what, it's not a good thing," Tanya said, thinking of the previous discussion. "Is it possible that they are just trying to protect someone or something?" One of the staff officers suddenly thought of something and said loudly. "What do you mean? Didn't they tell us about the Red Claws again?" Tanya asked immediately. "No, this matter is actually of no value. We tried to negotiate with the World War II zombies occupying the Prime Minister's office to obtain intelligence, but the other side ignored us, so we tried to provoke them to see if we could make them lose their minds and leak information verbally." "Provoke?" Luo Guang thought of a mustache and said, "You won't use their heads of state to stimulate them." This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. General Belt nodded on the side and continued, "We deliberately mentioned that person's suicide, but the zombies' answers seemed to imply that the person was not dead." "Then I understand," Luo Guang replied. The discussion could not produce any results, so everyone turned their attention back to the battle on the front line. On the front line, it seemed that the Prussian soldiers had temporarily summed up a set of methods to deal with World War II zombies on the battlefield, and the advancement speed at this time was much faster than before. However, as the troops went deeper, there were more and more obstacles. A World War II zombie with explosives tied to its body rushed over and jumped into the ranks of the Prussian soldiers under the cover of other zombies. With a loud bang, the whole corridor seemed to shake, and the loud noise also sounded in the temporary command center, scaring the guards outside the door and rushing in directly. "We are fine." General Belt waved his guards to go out. Yes, the guards did not ask any more questions, walked out immediately, and continued to guard the door. After the explosion, there was another shouting, and the sound of fighting was transmitted to the microphone of the front-line commander and broadcast in the temporary command center. Luo Guang knew that this was the sound of the enemy launching another hand-to-hand fight. If this goes on, there will be great sacrifices. Is there no other way? General Belt glanced at everyone in the room and asked. The staff officers lowered their heads. This was actually their first actual combat. Seeing this, General Belt placed his hope on Luo Guang. Although Luo Guang and his men could not go in again due to the order from above, but were on standby at any time. Once the situation became serious, they would have to be bodyguards of dignitaries, but at this time he still hoped that Luo Guang and his men could provide some useful suggestions. Luo Guang was about to speak, and his ears moved, and he seemed to hear a loud noise coming from outside. Soon, the guard outside the door rushed in again and said loudly to General Belt, "General, there was an explosion at the capital." "It's those World War II zombies," Luo Guang was the first to react. General Belt thought the same thing, and quickly ordered his men to take a regiment to scout the situation there. If those World War II zombies really came out, the people in this regiment would immediately carry out the blocking mission. Then, General Belt sent people to contact the police in Berlin and let the police be responsible for evacuating the crowd. But the situation was more serious than everyone in the command center imagined, and those big shots called at the first time. Thank you for subscribing and voting. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 158. Chapter 154 The Conspiracy of World War II Zombies. The capital is less than 1 kilometer away from the chancellery where Luo Guang and others are located, so General Belt quickly received the report of the soldiers sent out. Because of the World War II zombies, there were no political activities in the capital today, so there were only basic staff inside, and no federal parliamentarians. There were no other defensive forces except security guards, and those security guards were simply vulnerable to professional World War II zombies and were cleared out in an instant. So before the Prussian soldiers sent by General Belt arrived, those World War II zombies easily occupied the capital and planted the sinful Prussian Third Reich flag on the top of the capital. The police in Berlin have been on standby since this incident and are already on the way, but time is tight, so the Prussian head of the regiment quickly asked his soldiers to drive away some of the surrounding people. Some people were still reluctant to leave, but as the Prussian soldiers launched a direct attack on the capital, gunshots rang out, and they could only leave reluctantly. After all, their lives were at stake. Who knew if they didn't leave, they would be killed and blamed on the terrorists? Yes, the excuse used by the military to drive away the onlookers was the terrorist attack. The Prussian soldiers' attack on the capital was very difficult, and it was no different from attacking the fortress. Although the venue was more open, what appeared in front of these Prussian soldiers was a powerful regular army with a complete organization that had fought its way out of the battlefield, which was different from the remnants of the defeated army that had lost its organization and was still responsible for the blocking mission in the underground fortress. The Prussian soldiers suffered heavy losses in just a short charge distance of about 10 meters. When they left the car shelter and wanted to charge into the capital, they were immediately caught off guard by the ambushed World War II zombies, and fresh lives were quickly harvested like wheat. "It's an MG-42 machine gun, a damn cloth-ripping machine." Prussian soldier leader Toman Baratheon cursed immediately upon hearing the unique voice, and immediately asked his men to find and suppress the location of the machine gun. At this time, the situation was urgent, and the lives of his soldiers were at stake. Captain Tommen no longer considered whether to protect the Capitol building intact. He directly asked his soldiers to use grenade launchers and said that he would take the responsibility alone. The instantaneous fire suppression of the Prussian soldiers did not make the World War II zombies, who were not afraid of death, loosen their hands that were tightly holding the trigger, but it still played a role in affecting their aiming, successfully allowing a small number of Prussian soldiers to rush into the Capitol. However, before they had time to send back useful information, they were ambushed again by World War II zombies and fell into a pool of blood in an instant. The 2 platoons of the vanguard were directly harvested by the god of death, so Captain Tommen stopped acting rashly and could only arrange his men to block and surround the Capitol building first, and then quickly told his superiors what happened here. As soon as he sent his words to the temporary command center through the communicator's radio, Captain Tommen saw his adjutant coming to him with a civilian. The civilian had a black winged angel tattoo, a mohawk, and a black leather jacket, and looked trembling. Who is he? What is he doing here? Why is he still wandering here? Captain Tommen spoke in a heavy tone because of the sacrifice of his teammates before, which scared the civilian who was a gangster, but he knew that his men would not bring civilians here casually, so he did not drive them away directly. Just as the adjutant was about to speak, the civilian handed a Polaroid photo to the captain and said, "I accidentally took some photos, I think you should be interested." Captain Tommen took the photo, his eyes became serious, and asked, "Where was this photo taken?" "It was on the street near the Capitol. Not long after the explosion, I saw them rushing across the road. They were dressed strangely, so I took a photo." "Captain, the container they were dragging in their hands," the adjutant who brought people over said, pointing to the photo. There were outsiders present, so the adjutant didn't say much to avoid leaking information. Captain Tommen understood why the adjutant was hesitant, so after thanking the civilians for their assistance, he asked the adjutant to send the civilians away from the battlefield. Then Tommen turned around and immediately asked the communicator to send another message to tell General Belt this information, and General Belt immediately ordered that he would send other people to pursue, while Tommen's mission remained unchanged, to recapture the Capitol and drive the World War II zombies back underground. "They don't have transportation, and they can't run far with such a large container," the staff officer comforted. However, Luo Guang poured cold water on him and said, "The problem is that there may be a virus in the container." "Are there any facilities such as water purification plants around?" Leon asked hurriedly, worried that Berlin would have the same situation as Raccoon City. As soon as Leon finished speaking, everyone immediately turned back to check the Berlin city map hanging in the room. "Fortunately, the water purification plant is in the suburbs. Let's send people to defend it." The staff officer touched the position of his heart on his chest and said. "Wait a minute." General Belt noticed that Luo Guang's site was not on the periphery of the Berlin map. "General, are there any buildings such as water pumping stations on the river near the Chancellery? Can they be seen from the Chancellery?" Luo Guang expressed his doubts. General Belt and others who have been stationed in the military camp for many years are not clear about this problem, so he immediately asked his staff to confirm the situation. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Just as everyone was discussing, the phone in the temporary command center rang again. It was a call to ask Luo Guang and others about the departure time and how long it would take for Luo Guang and others to arrive. General Belt responded casually, covering up the fact that Luo Guang and others were still here, and then hung up the phone. "There is another question." General Luo Guang was not in a hurry. He still wanted to understand and even get the eternal virus. "Go ahead. That container could also be a gas bomb, otherwise they shouldn't have to cross the road. Of course, it could also be that there are more than one team, so cast a wide net." This is the conspiracy of those World War II zombies, General Belt said with certainty. Although he was mentally prepared, General Belt still punched the hanging map angrily. Hurry up and block the streets, call for support, and prepare for anti-gas and anti-biochemical. Luo Guang asked the other party to act quickly. I know. Thank you for your help. You should leave here and find those bastards. General Belt felt that the other party had helped him a lot. Captain, we are leaving now, and we can also use the excuse of traffic congestion, Krause said. Go to the guards to get the car and gas mask, General Belt said, then turned around and looked at the map with a gloomy face. Do we really have to leave here to escort those people? After several people got on the car, Leon finally vented his frustration. Krause, who was sitting in the back seat with Leon, did not wear a seat belt and replied directly. This is our mission, not our choice. But if we assist the general, I feel that we can save more people. Leon is a righteous man. Now the citizens of Berlin are suffering from a disaster. He can't turn a blind eye to possible sacrifices just because of a sentence. This is a mission. Wasn't I the one who was giving suggestions there just now? Luo Guang complained, started the car, and began to drive away from the chancellery. Tanya held a map in her hand and showed Luo Guang the way. They were going to the place where the officials were, the military camp outside Berlin. After the incident at the chancellery, the officials immediately took their families to the military camp for refuge. They were protected by 3 layers of protection inside and outside, and a fully fueled plane was on standby on the runway at any time. If these soldiers also went to help, they would have completed the blockade and started carpet cleaning of the World War II zombies. Leon looked at the situation around him and whispered. Luo Guang and the other 2 nodded and agreed with Lion's statement, but Luo Guang didn't want to comment on this issue, so in the end only Tanya replied to Leon, saying that she thought so too, and Krauser looked at the naive Leon and sneered. You are finally here. A fat official came out. He was the Minister of the Interior of Prussia. When he heard that Luo Guang and others were coming, he came out of a building and took Luo Guang and others in. As soon as he entered, Luo Guang blocked his sense of smell. He saw that the place was filled with smoke. Everyone looked heavy-faced, smoking and not talking. The Minister of the Interior, who had been smiling all the time, seemed out of place here. The Prime Minister of Prussia was sitting in the main seat. When he saw Luo Guang, he put out the cigarette in his hand and said, "Everyone from the Red Claws, what do you think about this?" Luo Guang and his friends looked at each other, feeling that the situation was not consistent with what he expected. However, since the other party asked, and he was a rich and powerful person, Luo Guang stood up and did not ask anything. He directly answered, "The situation is not good." Using this sentence to summarize, Luo Guang explained the current situation. That is to say, the situation may not be under control, and the whole of Berlin will become the second Raccoon City, the Prime Minister of Prussia said in a deep voice. I said a long time ago that I would do my best to solve the problem. If I had used all my strength to solve those outdated guys earlier, there would not be so many problems now. The Minister of Defense shouted at the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance was also angry and retorted, "Wasn't the money saved still used to buy weapons and equipment for you? And didn't you think we could just close the door and fight the dog, and it would be foolproof? Who knew that the special operations team of the Red Claws was so weak that they were beaten back in an instant and didn't play much of a role?" When Tanya heard what the Minister of Defense of Prussia said, veins on her forehead bulged, and she was about to refute, but was stopped by Luo Guang. The Prime Minister of Prussia also saw Tanya's angry expression. They still had to rely on the people in front of them to sit in charge, so he said, "Okay, this is not the Parliament Hall, what are you arguing about?" Speaking of the Red Claws, at least they all came back safely after entering. Can our troops do that? From their conversation, Luo Guang found that they seemed to know very well what happened in the Prime Minister's office. It's still our intelligence. The Minister of Defense was a little unconvinced, but seeing the Prime Minister staring at him, he could only speak hard in a low voice. The person who initially proposed that the Red Claw send a special operations team over was the Minister of Finance. He felt that his country had provided financial sponsorship, so he allowed the Red Claws to send people over free of charge. As for the money saved, he would not give all of it to the military, but would put part of the money into his own pocket to enrich his own piggy bank. The Prussian Minister of Defense doesn't know how to march and fight, but he is a dove, so he was elected as the minister, and the military only asked him to get enough military funds for the army. Therefore, in order to save money, the Minister of Defense agreed to the suggestion of the Minister of Finance, and even reduced the number of troops sent out to solve the problem to save expenses. This chapter is not finished yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Alas, let's get back to the topic. The Prime Minister of Prussia felt tired, and few of his subordinates could share those things with him. Everyone in the Red Claws, is there a way to quickly eliminate those zombies in the current situation? Clean them up before they spread. Unless you can use more powerful weapons, such as flamethrowers and rocket launchers to clean up the underground doomsday fortress, but this may directly burn what you want to ashes. The main problem now is those World War II zombies that escaped. How do they deal with them? Human wave tactics, dig them out. When Luo Guang came, he found that there were very few pedestrians on the streets of Berlin, and he also saw that the police patrol car was making a shrill sound with a loudspeaker, which was the home order issued by the Berlin municipal government. This will take a lot of time. And a lot of money. Now Berlin's business activities are basically suspended, which will affect economic development and commercial taxes. The Minister of Finance followed up with his hands crossed on his chest, looking at Luo Guang and others with ill intentions. The general believes that those World War II zombies are planning to spread the zombie virus on a large scale in Berlin. Luo Guang didn't know whether the people in front of him knew about the eternal virus, so he didn't say the specific name of the virus. So we can target the search at the water purification plant, where there are a lot of people. The Prime Minister reacted faster than the Minister of Defense and understood what Luo Guang meant. The Minister of Transportation, Construction, and Urban Affairs said with sudden realization, "No wonder a messenger just came to ask my department to provide the location data of water pumping stations and other places to the soldiers on the front line." After that, the Minister of Transportation, Construction, and Urban Affairs said with a smug look on his face, "Fortunately, I submitted a draft for the upgrade and transformation plan of the water supply system before. They just need to find the document in the reference room." Wait, Luo Guang opened his eyes wide, looked at the other party, and said, "The enemy also knows German. Did they see your reports?" Luo Guang thought that the World War II zombies did not take any action when they occupied the Prime Minister's office. Luo Guang, a former social animal who was used to electronic office, did not think of this problem for a while. After all, the World War II zombies did not have the ability to crack computers. Now think about it, it is probably because they did not continue to act because they were collecting and organizing intelligence, and the draft of the water supply system upgrade and transformation plan just gave the World War II zombies the location information where they released the biochemical virus. Hearing Luo Guang's words, the Minister of Transportation, Construction, and Urban Affairs broke out in a cold sweat, and other ministers were constantly recalling the documents they had submitted. "Hans, go sort out those locations and send them to Belt as soon as possible." The Prime Minister of Prussia did not pursue the responsibility. After all, such things were unpredictable. "Yes, Minister." Hans immediately stood up and walked out to find his secretary. "Now we can only pray that we can catch those rats," the Prime Minister of Prussia said silently. "Thanks, Omega. And thank you for the reward, I missed it last time." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 159. Chapter 155. The storm is coming. The prayers of the devout Prussian Prime Minister were not answered by God, and the situation was not brought under control, but became worse. The Prussian government, which assessed the previous situation, paid a heavy price for its contempt for the biological crisis. The team that the World War II zombies sent out to spread the virus was not just the one that was photographed. As the virus containers carried by the World War II zombies were accurately detonated in densely populated areas, the poisonous mist carrying the eternal virus spread rapidly, infecting a large number of people. People who didn't know the truth looked out to see what was going on. Those people did not maintain their sanity and had no incubation period. They mutated rapidly and felt uncomfortable all over. Unlike those World War II zombies who retained their intelligence, most people lost their human reason and became brainless zombies. General Byrd, who was unable to stop the enemy, immediately conveyed the news back to the Prussian Prime Minister, and said that he would do his best to prevent the situation from spreading further. After hanging up the phone, the Prussian Prime Minister was so angry that he slapped the table hard after hearing the news. He scanned everyone with his eagle-like eyes and asked, "The situation is so serious. Please give me a solution. Now is not the time to hold people accountable, so what he needs is not someone who takes the blame, but someone who proposes a solution to the problem." After such an incident in Berlin, it left a stain on his political career, but if he could solve it smoothly, he would still have the possibility to reverse the situation and protect his political status. The Prime Minister of Prussia, who had no hope for his ministers, set his sights on Luo Guang and others. Should we evacuate the civilians first? Otherwise, if the infection spreads, it will be troublesome when the number of zombies increases, and you will have to spend more weapons and ammunition to solve the problem. Yes, you will have to spend more money to solve the problem. Question. What Leon was most concerned about was the innocent citizens in Berlin, but he knew that those politicians were useless and could not afford to be early, so after thinking about the conversation between the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Defense, Leon came up with a reasonable explanation. After those ministers looked around, one of the ministers who knew the population of Berlin finally answered, 3.384 million people. Berlin has too many people to evacuate. But what he said makes sense. It will save money to evacuate civilians, and it will be faster to restore the economy later. The Minister of Finance glowed when he talked about money, and he was full of energy as he planned the business after the incident. Although the situation in Berlin is not optimistic, they do not think that this matter will be unsolvable. The problem is only the cost. There are only tens of thousands of troops around Berlin, and it is simply impossible to evacuate civilians in an orderly manner. The large-scale evacuation now will only give the enemy an opportunity, and the embassies of various countries abroad will also find that something is wrong. Then the citizens can only evacuate in batches. As for those in the embassy, they are all spies. Do you think they still don't know what is happening in Berlin? When the army entered the city, they had already sent spies out. Now is not the time to discuss these. Prime Minister of Prussia interrupted everyone and said to Luo Guang and others, everyone in the Red Claw Force, although we also want to evacuate civilians, we do not have this condition now. You have any suggestions? Yes, but I still need some information. After reading the information that the Angel Hell Gang had gathered for him, Luo Guang issued new instructions, and then said that he felt that many things had not been clarified since he came here. I have always been adapting to circumstances, and this feeling of being out of control is really bad. Everyone focused on Luo Guang. After Luo Guang glanced around, he looked at the Prime Minister of Prussia and asked, Prime Minister, do you understand how zombies came into being in World War II? I heard that the survivors of the first reconnaissance brought back a notebook, which mentioned a strange virus, which we have temporarily named the Eternal Virus. The Prime Minister's words were different from what Luo Guang heard from General Byrd, but this was not the focus of this topic. So Luo Guang did not point it out and continued, "You have confirmed the transmission route of this virus. Have you passed?" Luo Guang felt that he had exposed a lot of problems during this mission. Just because no viruses or other things were found in the research report, he was careless. After returning, he should propose to Samus to summarize the Red Claw's handling of biochemical incidents. The process will do. The Prime Minister of Prussia replied, "I don't know. We have not obtained samples of the virus. Otherwise, we would have been prepared to prevent the spread of the virus. But judging from the injured people now, the claws and teeth of those World War II zombies, there seems to be no virus in the body, the wounded have not mutated, and no unknown virus has been detected in the body or wounds. No one who has entered the underground fortress has been infected due to the air," Tanya said. Krause also joined the conversation, but this only means that the eternal virus was not leaked in the fortress. Krause, what Tanya means is that those World War II zombies can use poison gas warfare to infect all of us who attack the underground fortress, or use this method to prevent us from fighting, Leon said. Krause nodded and followed the words and asked, "But those World War II zombies are rational, so they won't turn enemies into friends if they infect us, right? It may be that there are not enough people, and their virus storage is not large, so in order to maximize the infection, they are not used in the underground fortress. But the problem is that this virus will not destroy people's rationality. Being infected with the eternal virus does not mean that they will turn against us. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. They will. The world cannot tolerate aliens. Even if they don't have this idea, humans will force them to turn against us." Luo Guang, who has seen the mutant movie, said immediately. Prime Minister Prussia and others saw that Luo Guang and his team had not come up with any constructive opinions, so the Prime Minister interrupted and said, "Everyone, now is not the time to discuss the virus. If you don't hide the eternal virus and study it earlier, we won't have to discuss so much." Tanya took this opportunity to retort the Prime Minister, and then explained, "Zombies are not scary. After all, their ability to spread is limited if they only rely on physical contact, but it's hard to say about viruses. For example, when viruses such as influenza spread, which one is not a large-scale infection?" Luo Guang did not give the Prime Minister a chance to refute, and continued Tanya's words and made a suggestion: maintain the stay-at-home order, block the area where the virus container exploded, and then send the soldiers out wearing protective gear, and do our best to eliminate the World War II zombies on the surface. Even if we can't eliminate them, we have to drive all those World War II zombies back underground, and then concentrate our efforts to clean them up at once. Don't worry about it at that time. Then our protection." The Minister of Finance did not want to withdraw the troops around him. "Won't you get out of here and stay away from Berlin? What's the point of having so many soldiers here to protect you?" After World War II, Prussia did not have many standing troops at this time, and there were even fewer troops stationed around Berlin, so Tanya said in a bad tone. However, the Prime Minister of Prussia said firmly, "No, if we don't stay here, where else can we go? This is Berlin, the capital of Prussia. If we are not here, what will the people of Berlin think? What will people in other countries think? Didn't you ask us to come and escort you? Why are you still pretending to be so arrogant? When we came, we saw that your evacuation planes were ready." Luo Guang also had doubts about this. This was the second different statement between the Prime Minister and General Belt. It was precisely because General Belt did not say that, so he let Tanya say those explosive words. Thinking of this, Luo Guang had some doubts about General Belt. "What? We asked you to come here to solve the problem, and we didn't even prepare an airplane for people to escape." The Minister of Defense frowned, looking unhappy. How could he still have the title of Minister of Defense? The Prime Minister of Prussia said strangely, "Let's not discuss whether we are leaving Berlin or not, but if we escape, we will definitely not ask your Red Claws for help, right? The most trustworthy is our own army. Hearing this, Luo Guang felt that this matter revealed a strange feeling everywhere. All kinds of true and false intelligence kept coming, and Luo Guang had no chance to think about it. If the notebook about the source of the virus was deliberately wrong, it could be understood as Belt's confidentiality measures for Luo Guang and others, but it was incomprehensible that the task of escorting dignitaries was deliberately wrong, and the phone calls for Luo Guang and others to come to escort were all passed on to Luo Guang and others by General Belt after listening to it. This could not be wrong. Belt had said a few words about those officials before, and Luo Guang could hear that General Belt was really dissatisfied with those officials. To put it bluntly, in General Belt's view, those officials might be the country's parasites. Could it be that General Belt wanted to seize power and usurp the throne? Luo Guang was shocked by his own idea. This is not the Middle Ages. There is no room for such things. Who told you that we are leaving Berlin? The Minister of the Interior, who had been listening to the discussion, asked. He felt that there was another conspiracy hidden in this incident. General Belt Luo Guang finished speaking and raised the question about the source of the notebook that he did not match before. He said that the notebook belonged to his uncle Walter von Braukitzk, and he did not mention that the notebook was found in the underground bunker. And the notebook looks a bit old, but it is well preserved and not much damaged. Luo Guang recalled the situation of the notebook and said, "Our intelligence was obtained by our intelligence agents, and according to the information obtained, the notebook with the virus information is very worn out." After the Prime Minister of Prussia finished speaking, he continued, "And we call General Belt to send you here just to learn about the situation from the front-line personnel, confirm how to deal with this incident, and what kind of help we will give to the military next. After all, your Red Claws have done a good job in the Republic of Papua New Guinea, and your suggestions that have fought against the enemy are also very important." Why did General Belt lie? Is it related to the World War II zombie incident? Luo Guang asked while thinking. Now he really hates this lack of intelligence more and more. Although he has the people of the Angel Hell Gang in his hands to use, he has confirmed that there are indeed military personnel in Berlin searching for something everywhere, and there was indeed an explosion, and then a large cloud of poisonous fog appeared. It is indeed what General Belt reported to the officials here. Luo Guang had also received information from the Hells Angels before, and what he said to General Belt was consistent. He was sure that Luo Guang had not been suspicious before, and who would have thought that General Belt, who was entrusted with such an important task, would have hidden evil intentions. After Luo Guang received this information just now, in exchange, he told them that something big was happening in Berlin and asked them to leave Berlin quickly through some underground channels. This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. The Prime Minister of Prussia did not answer. After waving his hand, an inconspicuous man stood up behind him and leaned over to listen to what the Prime Minister said in his ear. Then the man nodded and left the room. He is. Luo Guang glanced at the inconspicuous person and asked curiously. Intelligence officer, I asked him to go to the field to confirm the situation in Berlin. The Prussian Prime Minister was worried that he and others were deceived by Bird. One more question, can the military outside be trusted now? Oh, and there's also the matter of that plane. Half of the troops outside are Belt's men. As for the plane, I will arrange for someone to confirm the situation. Thinking of the worst outcome, the Prime Minister of Prussia quickly asked the people behind him to alert those who were not on Belt's side, and arranged a reconnaissance plane mission. On the other side, not long after Luo Guang and others left, General Bird picked up his uncle's notebook and walked out of the temporary command center of the Prime Minister's office. Under the protection of the guards, he walked straight to the basement and got off the bus to the underground fortress. Stairs. The people in the Red Claws didn't notice the problem, right? General Belt asked the captain who was guarding at the bottom of the stairs directly as soon as he arrived below. The captain below was chatting with his teammates, his gun leaning casually against the sandbag. Seeing the arrival of General Belt, the captain immediately stood up and saluted, and then said with a smile, "No, but it's a pity that they all came back alive. It seems that the Red Claws are indeed very capable. Otherwise, the first wave of investigators wouldn't have left any survivors. Have those people been dealt with?" General Belt's words were very cold, and the people he was talking about were the 8 people who returned from the Red Claws. They were sent by General Belt to attack the underground fortress not long after Luo Guang and the others left. "It has been taken care of a long time ago," the captain said with a playful smile. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. As he said this, the captain touched his still beating heart. General Bert replied, "That's good. The plan will soon reach the final stage, so don't relax." "For Germany," the defense captain put away his smile and nodded solemnly. "For Germany." After confirming the situation with the other party, Belt continued to walk deeper into the underground fortress. Wherever he went, it was still the same, without any corpses. 3. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 160. Chapter 156. Bert's Ambition. Bert von Kallestadt, whose original name was Bert von Brauchitsch. Kallestadt was the name of General Bert's mother, and his father was Walter von Brauchitsch, who served as the army commander-in-chief and field marshal of the Third Prussian Empire during World War II. This gentle but tragic Marshal Walter did not leave any formal suicide note or political will. According to the collection after World War II, the only letters and documents left by this Marshal Walter were some letters and documents written by himself. It's not that he didn't think about leaving something in this world, so Walter has always had the habit of writing a diary in his own handwriting. However, between 8 p.m. and early morning on July 20, 1944, Walter, who was idle at home, suddenly decided to burn almost all the materials in his hands under the watchful eyes of his son Bert, leaving only his own diary, which he solemnly handed over to his son Bert. This diary was exactly the one page of the notebook that General Belt showed to Luo Guang and the others. Having clearly foreseen the failure of the Third Prussian Empire, Walter said something that was not in line with his high professional ethics for the first time, asking his son to be a deserter and then go to find his first wife, Elizabeth von Kallestadt, who was Belt's biological mother. Although Elizabeth and Walter had divorced long ago and their marriage life was not happy, Belt was her biological son after all. No matter how cold her personality was, she eventually gave her son shelter and let him avoid the Nuremberg trial after World War II. That night, General Belt's respected father told him a lot of things, including the Eternal Germany plan, and Walter knew that this plan was not accidental, but that the mustache hoped that Walter would survive and help him when he made a comeback. Walter just told Belt about this, but he did not instruct or expect Belt to do anything, and let Belt make his own decision. After saying goodbye to his father, Belt's first thing was not to look for his mother, but to find the underground research institute that studied the Eternal Virus, which was the fortress under the Berlin Chancellery, before Berlin was captured by the Allies. Belt, who secretly got the Eternal Virus, left the underground fortress and injected himself with the Eternal Virus in a safe place, completing the mutation, and fortunately, there was no intellectual decline. Even after Belt was injected with the Eternal Virus, his appearance appeared frozen, so the General Belt that Luo Guang and others saw was just a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. After completing these, Belt found his mother, changed his name, and then he returned to the army again, but he did not return to the Air Force where he had been before, but turned around and joined the fanatical SS under the little mustache. Because Belt fought bravely and there was a shortage of talents, Belt was quickly promoted and became a confidant of the SS and the little mustache, escorting the little mustache who had not yet made up his mind to inject the Eternal Virus into the underground fortress. The reason why the mustache didn't inject the virus at the first time was actually very simple. He was worried that he was not a lucky person who could maintain his intelligence and rationality, So he decided to fight to the death and inject the eternal virus only at the last moment of the country to avoid losing control of the Prussian Empire in advance. Unfortunately, Belt, who was covering the mustache's retreat to the underground fortress, directly attacked in front of the stairs leading to the underground fortress and killed the mustache with one shot. In addition to Belt and the mustache, there was also the mustache's newly married wife Eva Braun. This woman didn't need Belt to do anything special. After she recovered from the shock, she lay directly on the mustache's body and cried, then took out a bottle of poison she carried with her and drank it all, and died for the mustache. Seeing this, Belt cleaned up the scene and disguised the mustache as suicide, while Eva just looked like she was showing favoritism. General Belt's motivation for doing this was not to avenge his father or to hate NC. He just went to extremes because he loved Prussia so much. He felt that it was the incompetence of the little mustache that brought his father's beloved country into the abyss. Then he dealt with some insiders who were bribed with money, left the chancellery, and waited for the end of the war in a safe place. Time was passing, and General Belt, who had been climbing up, had already controlled more than half of the troops around Berlin. His plan was finally about to begin, or was forced to begin. The reason was simple. The Raccoon City incident and the gradual disclosure of the biochemical crisis incident on Benoy Island made countries around the world pay more and more attention to the biochemical crisis incident. He had received intelligence that the Prime Minister of Prussia was ready to pass the anti-biochemical bill. In order to avoid more trouble, General Belt decided to implement his plan as soon as possible, and the first step was to let the underground bunker see the light of day again. Or some people would say that this was a superfluous move, and it would be enough to just transport the biochemical virus out instead of alerting the enemy. The problem was that they couldn't get it out. After the war, Berlin began to rebuild, and the city's expansion completely blocked other exits. On the other hand, the Chancellery was not a place they could enter and exit at will, and it also prevented Belt from gradually injecting the eternal virus into his followers one by one and slowly building an eternal force. As for why it cannot be transmitted from person to person, it is because the eternal virus will lose all its infectivity after infecting the host, so the Red Claw Institute did not detect any virus. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. So in order to infect his people with the eternal virus at one time, he needs a reasonable excuse for the army to enter the city of Berlin, and his excuse is the biochemical crisis caused by the zombies of World War II. Then Belt staged this big drama and deceived everyone. Without any signs, in the military camp where the Prime Minister and others were, the transport plane suddenly exploded when being investigated, directly involving the investigators and the surrounding non-Belt faction soldiers in the explosion, and then a thick orange-green fog began to spread rapidly from the center of the explosion to the surrounding areas. This explosion seemed to be a signal of war, a signal of betrayal. Those who were loyal to Belt's ideals in the military camp put on gas masks and began to attack their comrades around them, and launched an attack on the heavily protected Prime Minister of Prussia and others. The news of the mutiny in the military camp was quickly transmitted to the room of the Prime Minister of Prussia and others. The Prime Minister of Prussia stood up, slammed his hand on the table, and roared, "That damn traitor, this is a premeditated rebellion. Hurry up and call others to come and wipe out the rebels." No signal. Luo Guang stood by the window and put away his mobile phone and said, "Although it is said that, the signal blocker seems to only block the signal between the mobile phone and the base station, and the satellite mobile phone in Luo Guang's hand that can receive satellite signals can still transmit information, which is worth Luo Guang's spending so much money." Others heard Luo Guang's words and tried their mobile phones. They really couldn't make calls, and the text messages they sent also showed that they failed to send. How dare he? The Minister of Defense still couldn't believe that in this era, it can still be done in those relatively backward countries, but it is impossible for more developed countries like Germany with a stable political environment. General Belt naturally took these into consideration, so the more than 3 million people living in Berlin were General Belt's hostages. These hostages would eventually slowly become General Belt's partners, and General Belt was very confident about this, because he knew that after these citizens were transformed into eternal humans, they would be grateful to him for giving them eternal life. Those who are not of my kind must have different hearts. This sentence well explains why General Belt thought so. The citizens of Berlin who are no longer ordinary humans can only stand with Belt for their lives not to be threatened by ordinary people. For the sake of safety, Belt also placed the target of injecting the eternal virus on the Prime Minister of Prussia and other high-level officials. The plane was loaded with and detonated with the virus container carried by the World War II zombie team that crossed the street. It came to the military camp unimpeded along the way and mixed into the military camp with the help of the traitor. If the Prime Minister and others were caught in one fell swoop and turned into eternal humans, it would be more effective for Belt to control the entire country. Back to Luoguang, there was no hope of calling for help. The wires of the undisturbed wired telephone were immediately cut off at the moment the backstab began. We have to leave here quickly. But where can we go? There are gunshots everywhere. Who launched the attack? One minister has not figured it out yet. There is no evidence in hand, but there is only one person who has doubts before. The Minister of Finance, who is good at conspiracy, did not say the answer in his mind, but looked at the Prime Minister of Prussia to confirm whether he were thinking of the same person. Belt von Kallestadt, he is the only one who has the ability to launch a rebellion here, and what he said to the Red Claws is inconsistent with his report to us. The Prime Minister of Prussia gritted his teeth and said. But he didn't need to use two different statements. Wouldn't this deliberately make us suspicious? Belter was still nominally under the jurisdiction of the Minister of Defense, so he didn't want to and didn't dare to believe that Belter betrayed the country, which would affect his career. Seeing that the Prime Minister and he had the same idea, the Minister of Finance said, to make us confused, right? But what the Prime Minister said just now is very right. Apart from him, who else has the ability to start a rebellion at this moment? I say, everyone, the best thing to do is to run away quickly. Tanya looked at the poisonous fog spreading outside the window, and put on the gas mask given by General Belt's guard after confirming that there was no problem. Seeing this, the others also hurriedly asked their men to find gas masks and bulletproof vests for themselves. Are the people who are still protecting you your confidants? Forget it, no matter what, you should quickly stabilize the morale of the army and prepare to break through. Luoguang didn't have time to talk about this, and picked up the light machine gun in his hand. I understand, everyone in the Red Claws, please break through with us. The Prime Minister of Prussia was directing his men to pack up the documents and prepare to break through, but the Minister of Finance left his position, came to Luoguang and his men, and said to Luoguang and his 4 men. Tanya saw through the trick of the Minister of Finance. He wanted to find a few free bodyguards. She wanted to refuse, but judging from the current situation, there was no need for the Red Claws to take action, or the power, so she could only follow the Prime Minister and others to break through. Clausa didn't care about it. It was just a mission, but for Leon, he wanted to go to Berlin to help citizens in need. In the end, the 3 of them didn't speak, looking at Luoguang, waiting for Luoguang to make the final decision. This matter is a civil war in Prussia. We cannot participate in it, but since we are in the same boat as those present now, we are not immune. Luoguang's words confirmed the basic policy of the operation, and also stated in advance that his Red Claw troops were not interfering in internal affairs, but were involved in them, trying to avoid possible diplomatic disputes in the future. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Tanya, Leon, and Clausa, the 3 of you are responsible for protecting the Prime Minister of Prussia and broke out with them. As soon as Luoguang finished speaking, Tanya asked, aren't you going to evacuate with us? I want to sneak into Berlin and investigate the biohazard incident. But this is no longer a biohazard incident. This is most likely a conspiracy set up by Belt to launch a coup. Tanya no longer respectfully calls Belt a general. Luo Guang shook his head. In order to act independently, he did not order Tanya, who was as stubborn as a cow, as his captain. He patiently explained, the eternal virus is real, and the World War II zombies are also real. We can't ignore it. What if Bert is so crazy that he wants to infect all the citizens of Berlin with the eternal virus? But it won't help if you go alone and you won't solve the problem, Leon interjected. My goal is not to solve the problem, but to detect the situation. I don't know if you feel it. All our intelligence sources for this mission were given by others. As a result, we can't tell whether the intelligence is true or false. This gives us action brings too much trouble. That's why you have to go back to Berlin to confirm the previous intelligence with your own eyes. Clausa understood, but he didn't think Luo Guang could complete the task alone. Tanya knew that Luo Guang was more accustomed to acting independently, so she didn't say that she had to follow, and asked, "Can you do it alone? There are signal shields here, and the situation in Berlin will definitely be worse, with broadcasting equipment and the like. They will definitely be controlled. I am enough alone, and it is easier to lurk. As for you, please contact SAMS as soon as you leave the signal shielding range." After Luo Guang finished speaking, he looked at the Prime Minister of Prussia and said, "Prime Minister, I will first go inside and cooperate with outsiders. You have intelligence agents in Berlin, right?" The Prime Minister of Prussia immediately understood the reason why Luo Guang asked about this secret information, nodded and replied, "I will give you their contact information and give you a certificate. They will follow your orders after seeing the certificate." When Luo Guang heard what the Prime Minister said, he turned to Tanya and Leon, who were worried about him, and said with a smile, "You also read it, right? I still have reinforcements." Copy that. Tanya was relieved to hear that Luo Guang was not foolhardy enough to go it alone. Berlin is so big and there are so many people, so it would be easy for Luo Guang to hide on his own. Wearing a gas mask, Luo Guang couldn't see the faces of Tanya and the others, but he could probably guess that Tanya was unwilling, Leon was worried, and Clausa naturally still had that cold expression. After finishing speaking here, the Prime Minister of Prussia also quickly wrote down the contact information and certificate, handed it to Luo Guang solemnly, and said, "Please. Teaching aid guns are also quite expensive, and I plan to buy one for writing a novel. Evolution begins with Resident Evil." Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 161. Chapter 157 Breakout. Although he wants to sneak into Berlin, Luo Guang's first priority now is to break out of this military camp. However, he has no intelligence support at this time, and he doesn't know where there are more people and fewer people. However, Luo Guang speculates that the enemies in the direction of the poisonous fog should be there. Relatively few. Because the existence of the poisonous mist and the previous explosion had wiped out many people in that area, the enemy should not focus their efforts there. With this guess, Luo Guang decided to break out along the poisonous mist, just in time you can see if you can get the eternal virus. Many unsuspecting soldiers were directly attacked by the Belt soldiers, so the subsequent attack by the Belt soldiers on the area where the Prime Minister and others were located was very smooth. However, as the ordinary soldiers who reacted began to defend on the spot under the organization of the bottom officers, the pace of the attack by Bert's soldiers was finally slowed down, and they failed to directly attack the building where the Prime Minister of Prussia was located. After Luo Guang confirmed it was safe at the main entrance of the building, he walked out and soon ran into a group of soldiers rushing over. "Are you from the Red Claws?" Luo Guang's armband belonged to the Red Claws unit, which has been in the spotlight recently, so the other party knew the unit represented by the armband and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The betrayal of their teammates almost made them frightened. "Are you going to find the Prime Minister?" Luo Guang confirmed. "Yes, we need to confirm what to do next." "Then Lieutenant, you can go alone." The manpower is limited. The others should consolidate the defense here first, right? Luo Guang had no way to confirm whether the other party was a soldier sent by Belt. The other party was wearing a gas mask just like himself, so Luo Guang couldn't tell whether their expressions were strange or not, and they didn't have anything special like armbands of the same color. Mark. The lieutenant and the others looked at each other, then the lieutenant nodded slowly, agreed with Luo Guang's statement, and began to arrange his men. Looking at the green poisonous mist, which was spreading very slowly, Luo Guang felt the direction of the wind. It probably couldn't blow the building where the Prime Minister was. He saw the lieutenant's people guarding the main entrance. He didn't know the lieutenant was waiting. He didn't dare to expose his back to the other party, so he didn't go through the front door, but walked backwards to the side door on the other side. "Hey, where are you going?" The lieutenant's men saw Luo Guang walking toward the poisonous fog and shouted quickly. "I'm going to see if anyone survived." Luo Guang pointed to the gas mask on his head and said. Until Luo Guang finally left the lieutenant's sight, the other party did not attack. Luo Guang didn't know if the lieutenant didn't attack him to avoid alerting the enemy, but he could only believe that Tanya could solve it. Ta-ta! Luo Guang fired 2 shots accurately, directly taking out the Belt soldiers who were hiding behind the front of a Humvee and looking sideways to observe the situation. Just as he finished taking out this enemy, another enemy leaned out from the rear of the Humvee and was ready to shoot. Luo Guang didn't hesitate at all. He used his legs to accelerate suddenly and rushed towards the front of the Humvee, which was to the left of Luo Guang and the right side of the enemy. He successfully disappeared behind the enemy before he could fire. From the angle of the gun, the enemy quickly bent down and hid behind the bunker and moved around. Just as he was about to raise his head to confirm Luo Guang's position, he saw a strong military boot sole quickly enlarged in his eyes. This is when Luo Guang chose to quickly approach the Humvee after getting out of the enemy's shooting range, then slid across the front of the vehicle in a sliding shovel position, and kicked the enemy directly on the head. This was quite powerful, and the enemy was directly kicked down. His head it was buzzing and already fell into a state of boredom. Luo Guang would not miss this opportunity. As soon as his feet landed, he immediately carried out a follow-up shot, shooting the 2 enemies in the head and heart. Although the enemies all wore gas masks, Luo Guang decided to waste a few more bullets just in case. Anyway, being hit by a bullet in the heart would have fatal effects on ordinary people, but Luo Guang was worried about some people. The heart wasn't on the left side, so I just gave the head another shot. At this time, Luo Guang had reached the edge of the poisonous mist, and did not rush in because he was not sure whether the composition of the orange-green poisonous mist was really an eternal virus. However, because of his strong self-healing ability, most poisons cannot kill Luo Guang easily. Pulling up the gas mask, Luo Guang fanned the gradually dispersing poisonous mist towards himself. After taking a slight breath, Luo Guang put the gas mask back on, and the system's feedback soon appeared. An unknown virus was detected entering the body. Unknown virus, Luo Guang wondered, isn't this an eternal virus? After thinking about the question, the system replied, further analysis or intelligence support is needed for confirmation. Please ask the adapter if it will conduct analysis. Analyze it. Received, starting analysis. The system was analyzing there, and Luo Guang did not stop, but continued to act. However, since he had obtained the virus, Luo Guang did not need to go to the plane where the explosion occurred to look for the virus container. Adapter, virus analysis failed. Unexpectedly, Luo Guang was bending down to search for the enemy's corpse. When the analysis progress of the eternal virus had just reached 2.65%, the system sent a message that the analysis had failed. This was the first time Luo Guang encountered this situation, and he quickly asked the system why. The activity of the unknown virus is insufficient, and as time goes by, the activity of the virus becomes weaker and weaker, but in contrast, the virus becomes more and more toxic. The system's explanation is very clear. This poison fog was originally the abbreviation of virus fog. I didn't expect it to be poisonous fog. Could it be that Belt's purpose was just to kill the Prime Minister of Prussia? But this is not good for Belt, right? Luo Guang looked at the poison fog and thought. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. But on second thought, it is indeed possible. After all, Belt himself despises those officials. Luo Guang continued to ask, insufficient activity, then I will go deeper to collect. The attempt to feed the unknown virus failed. It is speculated that it has nothing to do with the concentration of the virus. There should be special preservation measures. It seems that I am not so lucky every time. Luo Guang still trusts the system, and there is no need for him to merge the eternal virus at this time, so he did not think of going deeper into the poison fog. At most, he would find a way to get the eternal virus from the underground fortress when he was in Berlin. Do you need to remove the virus in your body? Because the toxicity of this virus could not threaten Luo Guang's safety, the system did not trigger the regulations, but asked. Luo Guang did not stop his movements. He was searching the bodies of the two enemies for walkie-talkies or other communication devices. When he heard the system's inquiry, he replied, "Clear it." By the way, the analysis progress is still a little progress. Has the system analyzed any useful information? It only analyzed that the unknown virus may have the ability to extend the life of cells. Is it possible? So if Belt has the eternal virus in his body, his age may be much older than we thought. It turns out that old ginger is still spicy. When Luo Guang was thinking about this, he suddenly heard a lot of footsteps coming. According to the direction of the footsteps, Luo Guang put the car keys he searched into his pocket, and then quickly hid on the side of the Hummer, standing next to the rear tire. A team of dozens of people was moving quickly towards the direction where Luo Guang came from. Judging from their captains shouting to speed up and complete the encirclement, these people should be soldiers from Belt's faction, and they were planning to surround the side of the building where the Prime Minister and his men were. There were many enemies, and Luo Guang didn't want to face them head-on. After all, he was a carbon-based creature, and it was already amazing to be able to block pistol bullets. He couldn't even think about rifle bullets now. To some extent, this was also the reason why Luo Guang would not show his ability far beyond ordinary people in front of other people. So Luo Guang waited for the footsteps to pass the place where he was hiding, and after about 2 seconds, Luo Guang leaned forward and fired. The light machine gun in his hand had a fast firing rate, and Luo Guang was able to control the gun, and he caught the enemy off guard with a round of direct shooting. But the enemy was a regular army after all, and they were all well-trained people. When the gunshot sounded, they immediately reacted. Those who had cover immediately hid behind the cover, and those who didn't have cover directly lay down to minimize their area of being hit by bullets. Those who lay down didn't lie down directly. Like muscle memory, they first made a kneeling posture, and then lay down forward. Their movements were very smooth, but just with this extra movement, the bullets fired by Luo Guang had hit their backs and took their lives. The Bell Special Forces soldiers who escaped the disaster quickly launched a counter-attack and began to contact the teammates around to come and encircle Luo Guang. Since the opponent hid behind the bunker, Luo Guang would not foolishly set up his gun and wait for the opponent to show up, and the opponent would not foolishly compete with Luo Guang, who had already set up his gun for reaction speed. The only options left for them were to counter-attack with guns or throw objects. Some Bell Special Forces soldiers then fired a few shots, just to cover their teammates throwing grenades, and did not even aim at Luo Guang's position, so Luo Guang did not dodge, but he did not shoot to suppress the enemy, but chose to treat the opponent to pineapple, grenade. Luo Guang threw the grenade at the right time, letting the grenade explode directly on the enemy's head, blowing the enemy behind the bunker into pieces. Many enemies fell to the ground directly, and the pain made their bodies twitch unconsciously, and the grenades in their hands also fell to the ground and exploded again, basically wiping out that team. There were 3 Belter soldiers who were not fatally wounded. Because of adrenaline, they were like chicken blood. They didn't care about anything else. Seeing their teammates died tragically, they leaned forward and drew their guns, ready to fight with Luo Guang. However, Luo Guang took the opportunity of the grenades exploding one after another, and directly used the car keys he searched from the first 2 enemies to hit the Hummer, then left here at a high speed and continued to escape to the outskirts of the military camp. The bullets of the Belter soldiers hit the back of the Hummer, but did not cause any damage to Luo Guang and the car. The sound of the bullets hitting the car was as pleasant as the enemy's incompetent and furious curses. Although driving can quickly leave the military camp, the roar of the Hummer's engine will also attract all the enemies. At this time, the M249 paratrooper model in Luo Guang's hand is a short-barreled model, but it is still a bit long in the car. Luo Guang also has to drive. When moving the light machine gun, it will block the driver's sight. The steering wheel also prevents Luo Guang from aiming from right to left with the light machine gun, which will eventually slow down the speed of aiming at the enemy and fail to kill the enemy in the first time. So Luo Guang can only fight back with the shorter Beretta M92F pistol. However, the enemies Luo Guang faced in the barracks were basically within 20 meters, which was still within the effective range of the pistol, allowing Luo Guang to launch an effective counterattack. I don't know if Luo Guang drove too arrogantly in the military camp, or if the Belter soldiers thought that there was an important target like the Prime Minister of Prussia in Luo Guang's car, so the on-site commander of the military camp issued the latest order: get rid of Luo Guang. The enemy took out all kinds of anti-armor weapons, but they were all solved by Luo Guang with coquettish and bold positioning and accurate shooting. Invisibly, the pressure on the Prime Minister of Prussia to break through was reduced, but the Prime Minister of Prussia and his people didn't know about this, and this favor was not remembered by Luo Guang. Instead, Tanya, who identified the enemy in disguise, Krause, who accurately solved the high-threat enemy, and Leon, who was injured to protect the Prime Minister of Prussia, all impressed the Prime Minister of Prussia and others. With 2 Hummers chasing behind him, Luo Guang drove his car to knock open the barrier at the entrance of the military camp and finally rushed out of the military camp. But the problem was that the 2 Hummers behind him, his small pistol would definitely not cause any damage to the enemy's car, so Luo Guang could only seek opportunities to hit the enemy's body. The 2 Hummers behind him were each loaded with several people, in addition to the driver, and the enemies were leaning over the car windows, with one foot wrapped in the seat belt, and then shooting, trying to damage the tires of Luo Guang's Hummer. The tires are explosion-proof, but they still affect the speed of the Hummer, so that the enemy can catch up, so Luo Guang had to move the steering wheel left and right to avoid being hit by the enemy's tires. However, this operation still affected the speed of Luo Guang's Hummer. The distance between the 2 sides was getting closer, and Luo Guang would soon be sandwiched between the 2 Hummers, or be intercepted by the enemy in the American way. The American interception, also known as the precision stop technology, is that the front bumper of the chasing vehicle hits the rear bumper of the fleeing vehicle from the side, causing the rear wheels, drive wheels, of the fleeing vehicle to slip. The vehicle loses power and slows down, and at the same time the car will drift and deviate from the original driving direction, allowing other vehicles to easily overtake and encircle it. Luo Guang had naturally seen that the other party had occupied a favorable position, and was only a little away from the American interception. Of course, he would not sit there and wait for death. He braked suddenly and raised the light machine gun in the co-pilot seat to shoot at the vehicle next door when he was about to reach the opponent. The Hummer that was shot was caught off guard by Luo Guang's move. In an emergency, it made a sharp turn, drove off the road, hit the trees on the roadside, and stopped. At this time, Luo Guang's car speed was about 60 km per hour, and the other chasing vehicle was driving at a speed of more than 120 km per hour, so it surpassed Luo Guang in an instant and came in front of Luo Guang. Shifting gears to accelerate, this time it was Luo Guang's turn to use the American interception. An enemy poked his head out and tried to attack Luo Guang in the driver's seat, but Luo Guang stretched his hand out of the car window, rested it on the rearview mirror, and fired back. This is the time to show off your shooting skills. The enemy's weapon is the Prussian Army's standard equipment G36 assault rifle. Luo Guang is at an absolute disadvantage, but the brave win when they meet on a narrow road, so Luo Guang can only do it. The final winner is naturally Luo Guang, but this time, Luo Guang was injured. It's not updated until after 11 o'clock again, epsilon equals omicron asterisk, oh, it's uncomfortable. I lost all my saved manuscripts because of Yang before, and now my update rhythm is interrupted because of work. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 162. Chapter 158 X Organization Service Point. After killing the enemy leaning out of the Hummer, Luo Guang took back his hand holding the pistol. He took a look at his hand and saw that the flesh on the back of his hand was cut off by the bullet, but he didn't feel any pain. Luo Guang looked at it again and saw that the wound was almost completely healed. It was unknown whether the Hummer that hit the tree before was in a serious condition or not. It might continue to catch up, so Luo Guang had to deal with the one in front as soon as possible. The enemy drove the Hummer left and right, but this did not affect Luo Guang's judgment. He found the right time and directly hit the rear of the enemy's left rear side. Because the enemy was shaking left and right, Luo Guang only needed to hit it lightly, and the enemy's Hummer would skid and deflect directly. Luo Guang lightly stepped on the brakes and watched the enemy's car crash into the roadside guardrail and fly out of the road. There was no enemy to hinder him next, and Luo Guang did not stop the car to shoot again. He stepped on the accelerator and drove the Hummer to Berlin at a high speed. The drivers of the two Hummers were not dead. Since they had escaped the signal shielding area and their pursuit was fruitless, they had to contact their superiors in Berlin as soon as possible. Are you saying that a Hummer in the military camp successfully broke through and is heading towards Berlin? General Belt's staff did not follow Belt into the underground bunker, but stayed in the temporary command center of the Chancellery to handle various affairs for him during Belt's absence. After receiving the information from the people below, one of the staff with a little baby fat asked in surprise. Yes. According to the report, there may be only one person who broke through, and judging from the other party's clothes, it is a member of the Red Claws. Oh, the Red Claws, that's good. The staff heard this and breathed a sigh of relief, saying, they have no power to interfere in our internal affairs, so their troops can't come here to help, and the Red Claws here can't do anything. The staff didn't know that the Red Claws were funded by the X organization, so the information Luo Guang sent to Samus was actually sent to the X organization. So what happened in Berlin has been known by X organization, and X organization has already started to act. As a defeated country in World War II, Prussia was quickly infiltrated by X organization using capital. It can be said that X organization is the real ruler of Prussia, and the Prime Minister of Prussia is just their agent. Although the Prime Minister of Prussia and Luo Guang are both formal members of X organization, they do not know each other's identity. It can be regarded as a rule for all the formal members of X organization at the bottom level, in order to keep it secret. So the first order issued by X organization is to let the army outside Berlin go to Berlin to rescue the Prime Minister of Prussia, the agent of X organization. This can be regarded as a benefit for formal members, otherwise the first idea of X organization is to directly change an agent. In fact, there are also people from X organization stationed in Berlin, but they are not clear about the full picture of the incident. They also know nothing about the actual actions of Belt, and they think that the city is now carrying out the task of anti-biochemical crisis. To a certain extent, This makes Luo Guang's report more valuable. Not only them, but also the citizens of Berlin thought so. They did not realize that the superstructure had undergone earth-shaking changes. Basically, no one felt that a rebellion had occurred. If Luo Guang knew the situation, he would soon understand why Belt had launched an attack in the military camp and killed the Prime Minister of Prussia. In short, Belt wanted to blame the death of the top leaders on the biochemical crisis, so as to take the opportunity to establish a temporary military government, and then start his own political career, and finally control the entire Prussia. Luo Guang did not think of this at first because he had the ability to control others using the T. Veronica virus, so he fell into inertial thinking and thought that Belt also wanted to use the Eternal virus to threaten or control others. Staff officer, the people in the barracks also mentioned some other things. They knew the information before tracking the breakout target. What is it? Seeing the other party's worried look, the staff officer comforted him. There is nothing we Germans can't do with concerted efforts, don't worry too much. They said that the attack on the Prime Minister was not smooth. Because of the sudden change in wind direction, the poisonous fog we caused did not spread to the building where the Prime Minister and his men were. Therefore, except for the advantage gained by the initial sneak attack, the attack did not seem to be smooth. The people sent to disguise and sneak in did not send any signals within the expected time, so they must have failed. How was the encirclement completed? The Prime Minister of Prussia was specially arranged by us in the building on the left and right sides of the center of the barracks. The poisonous fog blocked one side, and the on-site commander has sent people to block the other three sides. I think there should be no problem, the subordinate said. Unfortunately, because of the signal shielding, the people in the blockade could not communicate effectively and efficiently, so they didn't know that one of the teams had been beaten by Luo Guang and only a few people were left. It happened that Tanya and her team led the team to break out along the edge of the poisonous fog and took Luo Guang's road. The staff recalled the layout of the suburban military camp in his mind and said, "That's good, well, the people of the Red Claws drove to break out. Can you confirm that there is only one person in the car? I can't see the back parking space and the car box. It's unlikely that there is someone. After all, those termites dare not take such a big risk to escape and have to hide in the car box to suffer. Yes, they must have arranged a large number of people to protect them." The staff also laughed and said, "It's like a giant baby who needs mother's protection." After laughing, he became serious, returned to work, and said seriously, "But this matter must be prevented. Strengthen the control of radio and other communication media. Although those ministers are basically useless, the Prime Minister is still a real talent. He may really slip out. We can't let those politicians incite the citizens of Berlin." Luo Guang did not encounter many obstacles when entering the city. Although General Belt has more than 10,000 soldiers in Berlin, it is still not enough to control the entire city of Berlin, so he can only garrison and defend key traffic arteries or important buildings. The Belt soldiers guarding the traffic arteries received information that someone drove a military Hummer out of the barracks and was heading towards Berlin. Therefore, the Belt soldiers were very alert. All the weapons in their hands were opened and loaded, and the heavy machine gunners on both sides of the road had their hands on the triggers of the heavy machine guns, ready to shoot and sweep the enemies fleeing to Berlin into a hornet's nest at any time. Luo Guang had guessed this possibility long ago, so he did not drive the Hummer directly into Berlin, but got off the car in advance and took other small roads to enter Berlin. The mandatory stay-at-home order did not seem to have much effect. Luo Guang saw other pedestrians wandering on the road. The police did not react much to this, but only reminded them to pay attention to those who behaved strangely. If they found them, they asked them to find the patrolling police immediately. Luo Guang hid in the dark alley, watching the situation outside, then turned and left, heading for the service point related to the X organization. At this time, Luo Guang's light machine gun had been thrown at the Hummer. After all, carrying that thing was not suitable for lurking operations. Although Luo Guang had torn off the Red Claw armband on his arm, he was still wearing the combat uniform of the Red Claw Force, so he could not walk on the street openly, otherwise he would be stopped by the police uncle for a thorough investigation if he was not suspected by the citizens. "Sorry, we are closed today." Luo Guang had just pushed the door and entered a clothing store with a rest sign, and a well-dressed waiter came up and said a formulaic opening sentence. Luo Guang didn't waste any words and directly reported the contact code. These service points are not just about showing the ID card given by the organization, but also need to report the service code of the service point. This code changes randomly and at any time. It may be a string of numbers or a line. It may change every half a month or a few hours later. Laziness is the death of life. The way to get the code is to check it on the pad. This should be said in German, so Luo Guang relied on the system to help. When the waiter heard Luo Guang's words, the expression of the professional smile on his face did not change, and said, "So you are an old customer, do you have your membership card?" Luo Guang flipped his hand and took out his ID card like magic. The waiters here have good eyesight and quickly confirmed that the card in Luo Guang's hand is real. The most obvious feature is that the light reflected on the card is colorful. These service points are not qualified to use the card swipe machine to verify the identity of the card owner. After all, the true identity of each person in the X organization is highly confidential, and they are actually just peripheral organizations of the X organization and dogs raised by the subordinates. Of course, the X organization would not really treat them as dogs, and just becoming the peripheral of the X organization could make them earn a lot of money, so they volunteered to be dogs. "Is the designer here?" Luo Guang asked in English. "This designer is not a fashion designer, but a personal image designer who will provide customers with one-stop services from makeup to clothing to weapon recommendations." "Yes, please follow me." The waiter picked up the cash register bell and rang it 3 times, telling the designer behind the front desk that a guest has arrived. There are still some rules for ringing the bell. 3 rings represent formal members of the X organization, 2 rings represent guests who are also peripheral members of the organization, and 1 ring represents a normal person. Finally, it is worth mentioning that ringing the bell 4 times means that an uninvited guest has appeared in the store. After passing 2 curtains, the waiter stood in front of an iron door and rang the bell at the door 3 times again. This is also a secret signal to prevent someone from forcibly threatening the waiter to bring people over. After confirming the secret signal, a bodyguard behind the door opened the small door on the door and opened the door after confirming who was outside. After the door opened, the waiter stood aside and gestured for Luo Guang to enter. Luo Guang was not polite and walked through an iron door and went in. Unexpectedly, it was not over yet. Luo Guang had to walk about 5 meters into the corridor, and then through a wooden door with a relief of a falcon catching a rabbit. Luo Guang finally saw the designer in formal clothes. After the bodyguard brought the person, he left here and went back to guard the door. The designer smiled at Luo Guang. This smile felt very gentle, and it didn't feel artificial and professional like the waiter outside. "Sir, how can I help you?" The other party didn't ask the name, but directly called the other party according to his gender. "How can you assume my gender?" Luo Guang blurted out this sentence. When he was alone, Luo Guang was easy to let himself go. He usually didn't talk much, but he talked more when he was alone or with familiar people. The other designer was stunned by Luo Guang's words and looked Luo Guang up and down. "Just kidding." Luo Guang also reacted. In this era, there are no such annoying things happening. The other party could not know this joke. What do you need, sir?" "1 set of clothes, daily clothes will do, but it must be convenient for me to fight. At the same time, I need a hidden holster." The weapons are Beretta M92F pistol and G19 pistol. Luo Guang put forward his basic requirements in one breath. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. There are many long guns and short guns neatly placed in the display cabinets on the wall, but long guns are not easy to hide and carry, so Luo Guang plans to only carry pistols, and long guns will be snatched from the enemy when a battle occurs. Well, daily clothes? What is the purpose? The designer did not make a rash recommendation, but asked for more information. He was not asking about Luo Guang's mission information, but confirming the details of Luo Guang's needs. Infiltration. The role is best to be an inconspicuous social animal in the crowd. Luo Guang is most familiar with this kind of role, and he is also very good at playing it. Well. Single, wearing glasses, a little listless, clothes are wrinkled. Since you want to hide a pistol, a suit with a jacket is a good choice, and a briefcase. Do you need to add a hidden submachine gun to the briefcase? What submachine guns do you recommend? The other party's suggestion is good, Luo Guang asked with some expectation. How about the P-90 submachine gun? It has a large bullet capacity, and the bullet power and penetration are also good, the designer recommended. When fighting in secret, the most uncomfortable thing is that you can't carry high-powered weapons, which puts you at a disadvantage when facing enemies with bulletproof vests. The P-90 submachine gun uses 5.7x 28mm bullets. The ordinary official model is SS-90, with a pointed bullet and armor structure. It has a good penetration effect against bulletproof equipment such as steel helmets, Kevlar plates, and standard steel plates. On this basis, the recoil impulse of this bullet is not greater than that of ordinary 9mm bullets. Therefore, the designer recommended this weapon to Luo Guang as soon as possible. Of course, the MP7 submachine gun also has a similar positioning, but the square P-90 submachine gun is more suitable for putting in a briefcase. At the same time, the MP7 submachine gun has just been launched and has not yet been circulated to civilian organizations. Luo Guang's eyes lit up, thinking about how to use this gun to rush the enemy's underground fortress, and replied, "Then let's use the P-90 submachine gun." Okay, the designer smiled because he could receive a good commission, and continued to ask, "Do you have a favorite color? Black or white, or mainly black?" Luo Guang said. "Understood, please follow me, I will measure your body width and length for you." After the designer finished speaking, he took out a roll of measuring rope from his pocket and walked towards Luo Guang. "Thank you for the votes, meow meow. Asterisk. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 163. Chapter 159, Investigation. Hey, who are you? Didn't you hear the broadcast? The stay-at-home order has been enforced, hurry home. A policeman stopped a pedestrian who looked very tired and told him about the stay-at-home order. Oh, I'm an employee of the office building over there. The pedestrian's reaction was a bit slow, and he looked a bit hunched. After stopping, he paused, raised his head slightly, and looked at the policeman before he reacted and spoke weakly. The policeman looked in the direction the pedestrian pointed. There were many tall buildings there, which were the commercial center and office center of Berlin. The police didn't know which building the pedestrian was referring to, but he didn't ask again, saying, "Oh, so you're going back to the company?" "Yes, I'm going back to work." When it comes to overtime, the police also showed a sympathetic expression and replied, "Thank you for your hard work, but the home order." "I know." The pedestrian pointed to the backpack behind him and said, "So I just plan to stay at the company for a few days." "Your situation looks too bad. Where is your company's union? Do you need help contacting the union or the labor department?" The police have seen several Asians who work hard, but this is the first time he has seen someone in such a bad state, so he asked kindly. The pedestrian paused for a moment before saying, "No, it's just that I don't know how long the home order will last today, so I need to go back to the office. As for my current state, I have been suffering from insomnia recently." It happened that the designer dyed Luo Guang's hair a little when she was doing makeup for him, with a little white hair, a dark shadow under the eye bags, and a yellow face, making Luo Guang look like he was sleep deprived, with dark circles so serious that he looked like he had kidney deficiency. Sorry. The policeman didn't know why he had to apologize, but when he saw the pedestrian's lifeless appearance, he didn't know why his mentality suddenly became depressed. It's not your fault. By the way, can I leave? Otherwise, the company will call again, worried that I'll get into trouble on the road. Haha, the pedestrian laughed dryly and said. The policeman waved his hand and asked the pedestrian to leave. Seeing the other party like this, he was embarrassed to check the pedestrian's identity according to the normal process. Thank you, the pedestrian said, and walked towards the office building with heavy steps. This pedestrian was Luo Guang. Although he successfully avoided the police's questioning, Luo Guang successfully entered the role and did not break away from the role of this social animal. He walked on the street without pedestrians with a dull look in his eyes. Missing Jill a little, what Luo Guang wanted to do most at this time was to hug Jill and bury his head in Jill's chest. Walking on the street, the sky had become gray. Because Luo Guang could take the side road, it didn't take him a particularly long time to reach the administrative district of Berlin. On the way, Luo Guang encountered a police check, but he still deceived Luo Guang. This time, because it was close to the area of the Prime Minister's office, there were no high-rise buildings around, so Luo Guang used the excuse of just going home from get off work. Even though the police saw Luo Guang, an Asian-looking man, as if they saw a plague god, they did not want to make things difficult for Luo Guang. They asked a few questions and let Luo Guang go. After these two experiences, Luo Guang also understood that these police probably did not know what Belt did, otherwise the police would not be so lax and saw him appear near the administrative district without checking carefully. Fortunately, most of these Prussian police were not warm-hearted people, and no one offered to take Luo Guang home. Luo Guang went to the area around the capital. He did not pass by the capital directly, but walked around that place, and then walked in a square park in the shadow. I saw many Belt soldiers guarding the area. There were shells on the ground, bullet holes on the surrounding vehicles and the walls of the capital, but no bloodstains, and no bodies were there. On the contrary, in the Republic Square opposite his own capital, Luo Guang found relatively fresh bloodstains on the leaves of a bush on a grassy area, and there was a Polaroid camera that was smashed into pieces under the bush. If Luo Guang had not had a good nose, he would not have noticed the few red dots on the leaves. Looking at this situation, Luo Guang confirmed that the battle in the capital was probably a performance, and he changed his appearance and became Wu Song, and turned to find the Hell Angels to find out the situation. Although he did not have any hope for them, Luo Guang still felt like going to see if there were any unexpected surprises. Boss Wu is here. The little leader who had met Luo Guang once came to his boss' office and said. The Hell Angels boss waved to the woman who was cleaning his hair to stop, and said, "You can go out." Yes, the woman stopped her mouth very obediently and left the room. Did Boss Wu say what he was here for? Probably about the information he asked us to collect before. He is outside asking everyone. The boss of the Hell's Angels was worried that Boss Wu was here to pick peaches, and said, "How many people did you bring?" "Just him." I'll go out to greet him." The boss of the Hell's Angels put on his pants and walked out of the room. The moment he saw Luo Guang, he immediately put on a flattering expression. As long as the other party was not here to steal his position as the boss, everything else could be discussed. "Boss Wu, why didn't you tell us first when you came?" "It's not a big deal. I'll ask a few questions and leave." Luo Guang glanced at the sweat on the other person's face and said, "Did I disturb your interest? I just saw a woman coming from the direction you came from." This chapter is not over yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading. Your business is more important. If you like that woman, Boss Wu, No, thank you. Luo Guang shook his head and refused. Okay, I've asked enough questions. Recently, if it's not urgent, it's best not to go out and wander around. Luo Guang didn't have time to chat with the other party, so he reminded him and said he was leaving. The boss of the Hells Angels didn't try to keep him, and sent Luo Guang away respectfully. Then he turned around and asked his younger brother with a serious face what Boss Wu had talked about with them. The younger brothers looked at each other, wondering why their boss was so serious, but Boss Wu didn't say anything confidential, so they just said one by one, and told their boss about the conversation with Luo Guang in a few words. The information obtained by the Hells Angels was of no value. The only information of some value was that a member of the Hells Angels went to wander around the Reichstag according to Luo Guang's instructions, and that person went there with a Polaroid camera given to him by his father, but he has not returned yet. Luo Guang thought of the bloodstains he found in the Republic Square, and thought that the person must have met with an accident. Since the other party killed to silence the witness, it proved that the person had photographed some secrets, but unfortunately it was discovered. Polaroid cameras do not require storage media like digital cameras, so no useful information was found on the damaged Polaroid camera. When the Hells Angels boss knew that his younger brother did not come back, his first reaction was that the younger brother took the opportunity to be lazy and went somewhere to fool around. After leaving the Hells Angels territory, Luo Guang went to the service point of the X organization and asked the designer to remake up for himself before setting off again, because Luo Guang messed up his makeup when he adjusted his face. Afterwards, Luo Guang came to the administrative district of Berlin again, but Luo Guang did not rashly appear in front of the gate of the chancellery, but hid from a distance to observe the situation. Luo Guang rejected the idea of pretending to be a drunkard. Who knows if the gatekeeper will shoot him directly? Looking at the two mobile phones that had been set to silent mode, Luo Guang received a text message from Tanya, and he could confirm that Tanya and others had successfully escaped from the barracks. After asking about Tanya's situation, Luo Guang called her. "Are you still escaping now?" Luo Guang asked directly. Tanya looked around and said, "Yes, but the enemy's pursuers have not caught up yet, so we are resting now." People like Tanya who have received military training are fine, but officials like the older Prime Minister of Prussia and a number of ministers who either sit or do piston aerobics every day can't hold on. Rather than dragging those officials away and affecting the combat effectiveness of her subordinates, Tanya finally found a small forest and temporarily defended on the spot. The subordinates here do not refer to Krause and Leon, but those non-Bell special soldiers who broke out with Tanya and others. The Prime Minister of Prussia saw that Tanya and her team were the most flexible among the soldiers here, so he issued an order temporarily, and the Minister of Defense directly signed it, allowing Tanya and the Red Claws to lead their men to break through. Tanya did not accept it at first, but later she received a call from Samus and finally agreed. The reason is that in Prussia's eyes, they are rebels, but according to the situation of those World War II zombies whose authenticity is unknown, the rebel leader Belt may also be a biochemical terrorist and is also the main target of the Red Claws. However, when it comes to leading troops to fight, Krauser, who has served longer, has much more experience than Tanya, so Tanya took the initiative to let Krauser be responsible for commanding the team, while she was responsible for laying down auxiliary and assisting Krauser. "Have you called other troops for support?" Luo Guang asked. "The call has been made. But the strange thing is that the troops in other places seem to have received the information in advance. The troops have been assembled and will arrive soon. And they will airdrop a group of troops at the designated location first, so we have to go and meet up with those troops now." Tanya explained the results of the communication with other Prussian troops, and the situation began to develop in a good direction. Luo Guang did not respond to the fact that he received the news in advance, and said, "Ask the Prime Minister what he plans to do after he gets support." Tanya did not act as a mouthpiece, but handed the phone directly to the Prime Minister of Prussia. "I'm the Prime Minister of Prussia, and I have a plan." After we meet up with the reinforcements, we will send troops to surround the rebels and then deal with them, but in the meantime, I want to trouble you, the Red Claws, with one thing. Although the Prime Minister of Prussia was talking about the Red Claws, Luo Guang felt that he was referring to himself, and replied, "Let me say first, our Red Claws cannot interfere in internal affairs." It was still the same problem, but the Prime Minister of Prussia had already thought of a way, and said, "I have communicated and confirmed with the commander of your Red Claws. If you can prove that Belt is a biochemical monster, or that those World War II zombies are not a trick directed and acted by Belt, you, the Red Claws, can take action, right?" This statement means that Luo Guang should deal with Belt, regardless of whether Belt has really become a biochemical monster, and Prussia will help Luo Guang cover up and say that Belt is a biochemical monster. If Prussia allows us to carry out the mission in Prussia. Luo Guang did not finish his words. The Prime Minister of Prussia smiled and said, "Then when we counterattack and suppress the traitors, I will trouble you, Belt." Decapitation operation? But I don't know where he is. Luo Guang did not refuse, because he knew that the X organization would soon issue him a mission, and he also needed to go to the other party to see if he could ask them about the eternal virus. This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. We will investigate this, and I'll leave it to you later. Luo Guang deliberately kept silent for a while before saying, "I understand. By the way, what is the situation in Berlin now?" The intelligence officer I sent did not respond, and something may have happened. The Prime Minister of Prussia was worried about the situation in Berlin, and asked with a little worry in his tone. Luo Guang replied, "The situation is stable. The police and citizens seem to be unaware of the rebellion. The stay-at-home order is still in effect, but there is still someone on the road." "Well, that's good. Next, I'll leave it to you. When we launch an attack and draw the enemy's attention to us, you can sneak in and kill Belt. No need to capture him alive. If you have teammates to help, it is possible to do it. Otherwise, you can't capture Belt alive by yourself. The Prime Minister of Prussia will not issue an impossible task, otherwise it will not be good for both sides if the task is not completed." "Got it, then I will continue to act. Prime Minister, please give the phone back to Tanya." Hearing Luo Guang's words, the Prime Minister of Prussia gave the phone back to Tanya. "Tanya, what he said is true. Samus has agreed." The first thing Luo Guang did was about the authority of the Red Claws in this matter. "Yes, Samus called me and said that other Prussian troops will come over later. We can just hand over to them at that time. We don't need to continue escorting the Prime Minister and others." Tanya paused and continued, "Then unless there is definite evidence that a biohazard incident has occurred, we can only wait for you somewhere else. I need to trouble you to stay in Berlin and cooperate with them from inside and outside." "But I am alone, and they are also careless." Luo Guang smiled bitterly. Tanya replied, "Alas, the sooner this matter is resolved, the better, so they have to use all possible resources to solve the problem. It will be easier to explain if you are the only one. And think in a positive direction. If Belter appears on the road, you can directly make a hole in the other party's head, then turn around and run away, and quickly complete the task." "I hope so, and then we have to see how Belter responds." Luo Guang replied seriously. The remake of Resident Evil 4 has changed a lot of settings, especially about Krauser, who seems to have changed directly from a comrade to Leon's instructor. Sigma. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 164. Chapter 160. Belt's Plan B. The plan could not keep up with the change. After communicating with Tanya, Luo Guang did not wait for the information from the Prime Minister of Prussia. He squatted at the House of World Culture outside the Prime Minister's office to observe the situation inside the Prime Minister's office, and accidentally discovered Bert's figure. The reason why Luo Guang chose to stay here all the time was because Luo Guang felt that the underground fortress was of great significance to Belt. If there was a place where Belt could appear, it would be either the underground fortress or the temporary command center above. Although he was just walking by the window, Luo Guang would never mistake him for the wrong person. The epaulets on the other person's shoulders representing the rank of general were a good proof. He is actually wearing the general's clothes from World War II. Could it be that this guy is actually a remnant of the NC? But I have to say that compared to the previous one, the guy's clothes are more handsome now. Luo Guang observed Belt's situation with a telescope and analyzed to himself, looking at his position and direction, he should be returning to the temporary command center. There are only 4 guards following him, all carrying G36 assault rifles seem to be relatively easy to deal with, but there are also a lot of defense personnel in the entire Prime Minister's office. Searched Can on Google. As Luo Guang saw, that person was General Bert, who had returned from the underground fortress, and he had also changed into the uniform of the Third Prussian Empire in the underground fortress. However, Luo Guang made a mistake. It was the martial costume worn by Bert's father, Marshal Walter. Just because Bert felt that he was not worthy of his father's former position, he removed all the various markings on the clothes. The epaulets were replaced with the rank of general, but Luo Guang only recognized that rank, so he misunderstood. The staff officers in the temporary command center were studying the current situation. When they saw Belt coming in, their eyes lit up and they immediately stood up straight, straightened their backs, and saluted Belt. "What's the situation now?" Bert asked. One of the staff officers replied, "The latest contact is that the building where the Prime Minister is located has been successfully surrounded. I hope that the battle will end soon at the military camp, communications will be fully restored, and the good news will be delivered." As if to verify what the staff officer said, the phone in the temporary command center rang as soon as he finished speaking. However, Belt felt a little uneasy when he heard the sharp and urgent ringing of the phone, and something began to deviate from his plan. "Hello, this is the command center." The staff officer picked up the phone and said expectantly. "What?" The expression of the staff officer who suddenly answered the phone changed. He covered one end of the phone and said to Bert, "General, our people did not find any trace of the Prime Minister or the others in the barracks building." General Bert frowned. The matter at the military camp was the most important part of his plan, and nothing could go wrong. Seeing that General Bert didn't reply, the staff officer took it upon himself to ask, "What is going on?" The on-site commander of the military camp said, "Judging from the words of the prisoners, the Prime Minister and others cut off their tails to survive and asked some soldiers to stay in the building to defend themselves. Then they sneaked away long ago and just passed by the encircling troops. Didn't you report before that the encirclement was completed? And didn't you arrange an early warning post in the military camp?" "We warned you in advance." The staff officer looked at the unhappy Bert and asked angrily. The on-site commander also felt aggrieved and said, "Because of the Hummer that broke through before, many people at the early warning post were shot dead. There is also communication reasons, and the communication between our separate teams has also been affected. When we find out the situation when we arranged for manpower to re-establish early warning posts, the enemy took advantage of this vacuum period." The on-site commander didn't finish what he said, but the staff already understood the general story of what happened. It can only be said that the luck was not on their side. The other party just happened to seize this opportunity and broke out without any fighting. Let them eliminate traces and return to Berlin to defend. Belt listened to the report and ordered directly from the side. Although the Berlin incident has entered a semi-clear state, Bert still asked his men to eliminate traces and clean up surveillance records. This was to allow some of his men who were absolutely loyal to him to distance themselves from each other and go dormant when his plan failed. Inherit Belt's own will. After the staff officer gave the latest instructions to the on-site commander at the military camp, he hung up the phone, and then several staff officers unanimously set their sights on Belt. Execute Plan B, let's turn all the people in Berlin into our subjects Birdside. He didn't want to go to this point, but once the general is successful, all bones will be withered. These are necessary sacrifices, and from Belt's perspective, it was not a sacrifice, but a gift. Belt's so-called Plan B is to infect the entire population of Berlin with the eternal virus and turn them into eternal creatures. He went to the underground fortress not just to change into a set of ceremonial clothes, but to confirm the virus inventory in the underground fortress, and to confirm with the scientists who had been conducting eternal virus research in the underground fortress whether the method of controlling eternal creatures had been successful. Complete. Although Belt performed a wonderful underground fortress attack in front of Luoguang, the information contained therein was also true, that is, irrational World War II zombies could be controlled by humans and launch a surprise attack at the right time according to orders. It's just that this control technology is not mature, and it may cause the controlled person to become a motionless vegetable, completely losing its value. The current direction of improvement is to overcome the weaknesses while being able to carry out large-scale control at the same time. This chapter is not finished yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content later. Unfortunately, the progress is not good, but Belt has a backup plan, which is to use propaganda and other methods to brainwash those Berlin citizens who still have reason. Belt already has a plan in mind, which is to use the influence of the Raccoon City incident to make the Berlin citizens feel that the government has abandoned them, so that those Berlin citizens will voluntarily contribute to themselves, and at the same time, when negotiating with the Prussian government, let the Prussian government be cautious and let it agree to the entire Berlin to secede from independence and become a god country similar to the Vatican. Finally, Belt will continue to study the eternal virus until it can be released on a large scale, using the secrecy and infectiousness of biological and chemical attacks to transform the entire Prussian people into eternal German people. However, this Plan B has a very difficult problem to solve, that is, the eternal virus is a delicate virus that needs to be stored with inert gas, and it is not resistant to high or low temperatures. It needs to survive and self-replicate at a suitable temperature, so the research work of those researchers is so slow, and Belt doesn't have to make so much trouble. If the living environment does not meet the requirements of the eternal virus, then these eternal viruses will begin to crystallize on their own surface, gradually becoming only toxic poisons, killing themselves, and it is for this reason that the eternal virus that has existed for a long time has not been able to spread on a large scale. And this crystallization is irreversible, or in other words, the researchers in the underground fortress have not developed a way to reverse crystallization for so many years. The only thing they have studied is that after the eternal virus is placed in a suitable environment during this process, the eternal virus will stop crystallizing and quickly self-replicate the non-crystallized eternal virus. Originally, the plane in the military camp was a trap for the surrounded Prime Minister of Prussia and others. As long as the Prime Minister of Prussia intends to leave by plane, it will explode and crash in the air. This is also a common method. The virus container was actually a reward for the Belter soldiers' heroic fighting. As long as they had a breath left, they could survive by injecting the eternal virus. However, when the Belter soldiers were carrying the virus container and passing by the plane, they were seen by the personnel sent by the Prime Minister of Prussia to investigate the plane, and the investigator was very cautious to ask the non-Belt soldiers around. The commander of the Belter military camp who discovered the situation was worried that the night would be long and there would be many dreams. Whether he let the investigators go back to report or killed them to silence them, it would make the Prime Minister suspicious, so he made a prompt decision to detonate the plane and launch an attack at the same time, intending to use the wind direction to blow the poisonous fog formed by the eternal virus to the direction of the Prime Minister of Prussia and eliminate the Prime Minister of Prussia in one fell swoop. Back to Plan B, the crystallization process of the eternal virus is not short, and the shortest is more than half an hour, so Belter plans to give a speech to gather the citizens of Berlin in the square, and then release the eternal virus to infect the citizens on a large scale. As for why the activity of the eternal virus that entered Luo Guang's body was constantly weakening, it was because the eternal virus entered Luo Guang's body and found that this place was very suitable for its own reproduction, so it immediately prepared to show its skills and turn the host's body into its own eternal fortress. As a result, it suddenly found that a big boss, T-virus that merged multiple viruses, appeared around and was staring at it, then held it hostage and poked it at every turn, making the eternal virus realize that the environment was not suitable for reproduction, so its crystallization process did not stop, but continued to accelerate, and finally became a poison. While Belt was directing his men to implement Plan B, Luo Guang sent a text message to Tanya and prepared to start the decapitation operation. Luo Guang didn't want to wait any longer. Who knew if Belt would go to other places for inspection? He couldn't catch up with the car with his legs, and the Hummer was not a convertible that Luo Guang could easily give Belt a brain hole. Tanya didn't fight, and quickly replied to Luo Guang with a text message, saying that if Luo Guang was sure, it would be fine, and the Prime Minister of Prussia agreed to the action. After putting away his cell phone, Luo Guang opened his briefcase and took out his P-90 submachine gun. He then opened the zipper at the bottom of the briefcase, which contained 4 spare magazines for the P-90. He took out a tactical belt from his backpack and put it on. Luo Guang put the magazine, the Beretta pistol on the left inner side of his suit jacket, and the spare magazine on the tactical belt. As for his clothes, Luo Guang did not change them. Instead, he covered the inside of his clothes with stretchable hardened armor, then changed his appearance. His skin color became closer to that of a Prussian, and his eye color turned golden. Finally, he put on the devil mask he had used in Berlin before. After checking again that the things he was wearing did not affect his ability to move, and that there would be no sound due to his movements, Luo Guang stepped on the wall, jumped left and right, and jumped down from the roof of the House of World Cultures near the Chancellery. The area near the Chancellery was like a park, and there were not many shelters, but it was only 1 street away from the House of World Cultures, so Luo Guang quickly touched the outer wall of the Chancellery. Luo Guang could jump in directly from outside the surveillance field of view like he did in the Chuck family mansion, but he didn't know the location of most of the surveillance cameras inside, so he was worried that he would be caught by the surveillance camera the moment he landed. Anyway, he would be seen by the surveillance camera, so there was no need to do anything unnecessary and cause trouble for himself. As Luo Guang expected, the surveillance personnel in the Prime Minister's office immediately discovered that the suspicious person by the wall was observing the situation inside the Prime Minister's office in a rat-like manner, and then directly climbed into the Prime Minister's office. The surveillance personnel did not dare to neglect it and immediately reported the matter to General Belt and the outer defense personnel. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content later. Now is a very good time. Belt needs more intelligence. He thinks that the people outside may be intelligence personnel directly under the Prime Minister, so that his outer personnel can try to capture the intruder alive. Luo Guang heard many footsteps coming in his direction. He first shot a camera and then took advantage of not being surrounded to blow up several surrounding surveillance cameras. Then he did not move rashly and exposed himself to surveillance again. Without the intelligence support of surveillance, the footsteps of those who surrounded him became noticeably quieter, and they lined up and walked towards Luo Guang. Special forces don't practice indoor close combat, CQB, all day, let alone ordinary soldiers, so the enemies besieging Luo Guang advanced very cautiously, covering each other in turns. One of the enemies made a gesture to get in position, and then his teammates began to move to the next bunker, while he concentrated on raising his gun to cover. Suddenly, a flash bomb was thrown over, accompanied by a loud noise and a strong white light that suddenly appeared, directly causing the enemies who were covering each other to temporarily go blind and deaf. Luo Guang took this opportunity to put his gun on his left shoulder, raised his gun and moved to the left side of the bunker and shot and killed the enemy halfway. Then, while the enemy was still blind and deaf, Luo Guang began to attack. The enemies a little further away were less affected. Although their ears were buzzing, their eyes could barely see things, and they wanted to poke out from behind the bunker to attack Luo Guang. But Luo Guang had already simulated and confirmed the possible hiding positions of the enemy in his mind. As long as the enemy showed a little bit, Luo Guang's bullets would arrive immediately. In less than 20 seconds, a team of 7 was easily solved by Luo Guang, and the price paid was only a flash bomb and 20 bullets. The breakthrough was opened, Luo Guang came to the staircase, and after destroying the surveillance here, Luo Guang did not take the stairs, but directly jumped to the 3rd floor with 2 jumps. The temporary command center was on this floor. The surveillance at the staircase on the 3rd floor was destroyed. The enemy's target may be general. The fat staff received the information from the monitoring room and said hurriedly. Another staff asked, "General, do you want to evacuate?" However, the general shook his head and said, "Where else can we evacuate? Let someone stop him and cover us to the underground fortress, and notify the ancestors of the underground fortress to prepare for battle." Received. The fat staff received the order and stayed here to make arrangements, while the other 2 staff followed General Belt and the guards on standby at the door and went to the basement from the stairs on the other side. By the way, if a writer gets injured while out collecting materials, would it be considered an industrial injury? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 165. Chapter 161 Caught the Tongue. Luo Guang came to the 3rd floor and began to clear the enemies here. Although Luo Guang cleared the surveillance cameras that passed by, so that the enemies could not provide real-time reports of Luo Guang's every move to his teammates, the cleared surveillance cameras were a clue to Luo Guang's route of action. So the enemies on the 3rd floor had already set up guns and were on standby in the corridor, and some of the enemies had flash bombs in their hands. As long as Luo Guang poked his head out, his teammates would shoot to cover him throwing flash bombs, and then rush up to capture the enemy alive. Luo Guang just poked his head out slightly, and immediately retracted it, and the bullet immediately hit the double door separating the stairwell and the corridor. Although he only took a quick look at the corridor with a single eye, the weapons and positions in the hands of the enemies had been remembered by Luo Guang, and he also understood that these enemies wanted to throw various projectiles to counter him. So Luo Guang did not rush forward, or cut out the projectiles and throw them over, but directly used the space of the stairs to jump down, directly avoiding the range of the enemy's projectiles. The enemy had already prepared defenses, and it was difficult for Luo Guang to break through, so he turned to the 2nd floor and launched a surprise attack on the enemy who intended to outflank him. Pulling the trigger tightly, the enemy who received the report from the 3rd floor thought that Luo Guang was still entangled with his teammates on the 3rd floor. Unexpectedly, when the loud noise just came from the 3rd floor, Luo Guang had already come to the 2nd floor and attacked the 2nd floor enemies who were not behind the bunker and were advancing at full speed. Pulling the trigger tightly, Luo Guang used up the remaining bullets in the current magazine, eliminated all the enemies who were marching in an orderly manner, and then replaced a new magazine. This was the second to last magazine of his P-90 submachine gun. He took out his pistol and blew up the surveillance camera on the 2nd floor corridor behind him that monitored half of the corridor. Luo Guang did not continue to move forward. Taking advantage of this moment when there were no enemies, Luo Guang climbed out of the corridor window, and then jumped directly to the 3rd floor with the air conditioner outdoor unit. Luo Guang's waiting before launching the attack was not in vain. He had already confirmed that the window here was open, so Luo Guang turned over and entered directly, appearing in the middle of the enemies on the 3rd floor who were preparing to rush up and capture Luo Guang alive. The number of enemies was 5 in front and 2 in the back. The enemy did not expect Luo Guang to suddenly jump in from outside the building, and Luo Guang took advantage of the enemy's stunned moment and immediately started shooting, and at the same time began to move and approach the enemy, intending to use the enemy's body as his own cover. These enemies were not eternal zombies. Luo Guang was in the middle of the enemy, so they did not dare to shoot rashly, but they were already very close to Luo Guang, and with the order to capture him alive, they directly chose to draw the dagger or bayonet at their waist and rush towards Luo Guang. However, Luo Guang did not have this problem. When designing the P-90 submachine gun, it was considered that it would be used in narrow environments. The gun body was shortened while maintaining the barrel length as much as possible, so the gun body of the submachine gun is only half a meter. Therefore, in close-range combat, this P-90 submachine gun can also perform well. Therefore, Luo Guang did not take out the knife named Invisible, but directly held the P-90 submachine gun to deal with the enemies rushing towards him. Da-da. 2 shots solved the enemy in front of him. The enemy's bayonet behind him had already stabbed forward. Luo Guang immediately used a scorpion tail swing, leaned forward, and kicked his legs backward, hitting the enemy's balls behind him. Luo Guang retracted his legs, turned around, and swung his back fist like a whip, directly hitting the enemy's temple, who was bending over and covering his balls, and directly sent the enemy to hell. Da-da-da. Seeing that the man behind the dead enemy was not a man of honor and decided to sacrifice his teammates and shoot at himself, Luo Guang used his shoulder to hold the dead enemy leaning forward as a cover, and shot with one hand holding the gun from the waist, and fired 3 shots in a row. Although it was called suppression, the 3 bullets still hit the enemy, who was about to shoot accurately, successfully completing the task, and finally solved the enemy on one side, leaving 4 enemies on the other side. There were still many bullets in the P-90 submachine gun in his hand. Luo Guang circled around the corpse and let the meat shield block the remaining enemies in front. When the 4 enemies saw the P-90 submachine gun in Luo Guang's hand, they also understood that even if they doubled, they would not be enough to block the bullets of the P-90 submachine gun, so they could only fight to the death for survival. The 2 people in the middle raised their guns and aimed at Luo Guang's arms and legs, while the enemies on the left and right were closer to Luo Guang, so they still rushed towards Luo Guang with bayonets. Ignoring the 2 people who came to fight at close range, Luo Guang shot at the fastest speed to kill the 2 people standing in the middle of the corridor with only one breath. The enemy's bullets did not cause much damage to Luo Guang because of the meat shield and the hardened armor on Luo Guang's body. The only serious shot hit the left side of Luo Guang's calf bone. But because of the hardened armor and Luo Guang's extraordinary body hardness, the bullet did not penetrate the calf. Luo Guang squeezed out the bullet by squirming muscles and then healed quickly. Although Luo Guang could not resist the attack of the assault rifle, ordinary gunshot wounds could not cause fatal damage to Luo Guang, nor would it affect Luo Guang's combat effectiveness. The 2 enemies on the left and right launched attacks at the same time, and both sides launched frontal thrusts at the same time, one up and one down, cooperating very tacitly. Luo Guang looked at the 2 men who looked similar, said sorry in his heart, and directly exerted force on his shoulders, threw the meat shield to the left, blocked the attack on the left, and at the same time half-turned to the right, holding the gun in his right hand, ignoring the attack of the enemy on the right, and fired back directly. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Under the unbelievable eyes of the enemy on the right, the bayonet in his hand only pierced Luo Guang's suit but could not go any further. This enemy could only leave in regret. The man on the other side saw his brother killed, roared, but could not cover the sound of the gun. When the enemy on the left threw the meat shield aside, Luo Guang took out the G19 pistol on the right side of his suit with his left hand and shot to kill the enemy. After solving the enemy here, Luo Guang touched the suit on the right. It was the spare magazine of the G19 that blocked the enemy's bayonet, and the hardened armor had no chance to appear. After dealing with the enemies here, Luo Guang quickly ran to the corridor in front. At the end of the corridor was a T-shaped intersection. One end of the corridor was the temporary command center, and the other end was the stairs leading to the basement led by General Belt. First, he threw 2 flash bombs to both sides of the corridor, and then with the strong light and loud noise, Luo Guang checked the situation left and right and found that only the right side was guarded by enemies, and that was where the temporary command center was located. So Luo Guang was not polite, and then shot at the enemies on the right. Half a magazine of bullets was fired, and only 5 heads were harvested. It was not that Luo Guang did not want to deal with an enemy with 1 or 2 bullets, but because Luo Guang faced a large number of enemies, he needed to spend extra bullets to suppress the enemy and nail the enemy behind the bunker and dare not show his head. Kicking open the door of the temporary command center, Luo Guang immediately dodged to the right and threw another flash bomb in. After the explosion, Luo Guang was very steady. He was not anxious to rush into the room and attack the enemy as soon as possible. Because the indoor environment is complicated and there are various bunkers, which I have used in the Prime Minister's office before, the enemy may make some preparations in advance, such as wearing military headphones and other measures, so the flash stun grenade may not be able to completely deprive the enemy of the ability to counterattack. Finally, Luo Guang quickly cut from left to right to confirm the situation inside, and then rushed into the room. After 4 shots to kill 2 soldiers responsible for protecting the staff, Luo Guang captured the baby fat staff. Luo Guang did not say nonsense, removed the headphones worn by the other party, and directly applied T. Veronica virus to the wound on his hand. Where did Belt go? Don't want to know. Unless you join us, the baby fat staff said righteously, but the words in his mouth sounded very arrogant. There were footsteps outside the door. It was the soldiers sent by Belt to catch up. Some enemies saw Luo Guang holding their own staff hostage, and quickly raised their hands to gesture to stop the teammates on the opposite side from throwing grenades. They have confirmed that there is only one enemy, so they started shouting in order to capture the enemy alive. Luo Guang hid behind a table, listening to the words of the staff officer controlled by Luo Guang, while typing the information and sending text messages to Tanya and his special contact Susanna Bell in the X organization, and kept talking to the people outside the door to delay time. The baby fat staff officer leaned behind a large table, stretched his neck, raised his head and shouted, and talked to his teammates outside, saying that he was persuading the enemy to join the side of justice. The staff officers under General Belt were all his confidants and very loyal, so the Belt soldiers outside the door could only wait outside the door. Is the eternal virus sample in the underground fortress? Luo Guang asked. It should be, there is only a special storage facility there. But in the past, except for General Belt, no one else has entered the underground bunker. Luo Guang asked another important question, well, who of you has been injected with the eternal virus? Except for General Belt, only the ancestors who were injected with the eternal virus in the late World War II. That is to say, the World War II zombies that Luo Guang saw really exist, and the Red Claws can indeed participate in this matter. Luo Guang pays so much attention to this point because he does not want to become a victim of political struggle, so he has been confirming it again and again, but if he knew that the Prime Minister of Prussia is also a formal member of the X organization, he may not be entangled in this matter. Belt has also thought about this problem, but the Red Claws have not many people, no strength and military power, so he does not care. Why didn't we inject you? Because we haven't passed the test yet. Only those who have experienced the baptism of war are eligible for eternal life. Some guys who only care about their own interests actually think that we have injected him with the eternal virus, but it is actually a prepared nutrient solution and sleeping pills. After they have a good sleep, they feel refreshed and naturally think it is real, but we lied to them that this is a temporary version and it takes multiple injections to achieve eternal life, so they will continue to assist us in completing the plan. And those who are fighting in the military camp, they originally had the opportunity that I envy. They could be injected with the eternal virus in advance and become eternal warriors like their predecessors, but they messed up the mission of the military camp and involved the virus awarded to them in the explosion of the plane. The fat baby staff officer showed a fanatical expression on his face, and laughed at the pests in his team who would be eliminated sooner or later, and said, "In the eyes of the current staff officer, he himself is persuading the enemy in front of him to turn back from the lost path, which is a great achievement that is about to succeed. He thinks that if General Burt can get talents with such strong combat effectiveness, he can do more things. This is why Luo Guang used some psychological methods during manipulation to make the baby fat staff have these thoughts. Because Luo Guang was worried that some strong-willed people would break through his control, Luo Guang did not use methods that were too contrary to the opponent when controlling him. Instead, he started from the side, just like Copus Donald Hicks, the head of the Donald family. I have always felt that Luo Guang is my only good friend worth talking to. What is your ultimate goal?" Luo Guang's tone was very calm, but in the ears of the baby fat staff officer, Luo Guang's heartbeat could be heard. "Fulfill the wishes of our ancestors and build a paradise for all German people in advance." The baby fat staff officer's tone was a little bitter as he continued, "If we fail, it will prove that we in Germany should not take this path. At that time, we will also become pioneers, sacrifice in the fire, and be remembered by the world." "That's good. Can you take me into the underground fortress to find Bert? I want to talk to him." Luo Guang wanted to capture the thief first, so he asked directly. "Okay." The baby fat staff officer's face was filled with joy. He felt that he had successfully convinced a powerful enemy. The two reached an agreement. First, the baby fat staff member stood up, waved his hand, and told people outside that everything was fine. After saying that, the baby fat staff member also used the radio to inform the people in the Prime Minister's office. Of course, this radio announcement and telephone communication are not successful, and will not be conveyed to the basement and underground fortress, so the baby fat staff can rest assured to do this, and it will be more convenient for later actions, so that General Belt can see this as soon as possible. A rare talent. It was also the first time that Luo Guang intuitively felt how powerful the control and restraint of his ability was, but he did not want to create a new world like Alexia. A world where everyone would only obey his orders would be too boring. The people outside looked at each other. Their captain didn't look like he was being coerced. He was holding hands with his former enemy like a long-lost brother. But the enemy had just killed many of their teammates, and now seeing his staff talking and laughing with the enemy, he felt uncomfortable in his heart, so he did not give Luo Guang a good look and stared at Luo Guang. Luo Guang didn't care. Like other soldiers, he didn't trust each other, so both sides lowered their guns, but still held the guns in their hands. But one difference is that the soldiers sent by Bert were afraid of accidental injury, so they put their fingers next to the trigger for safety reasons. But for Luo Guang, there were enemies here, so he chose to press the trigger falsely. One of the soldiers, his friend, was killed by Luo Guang, so when he saw Luo Guang walking out as if nothing had happened, he felt very unhappy and wanted to protest to the staff, but his teammates with quick eyesight and quick hands stopped him. Then he whispered in his ear, "Staff officers have their own discretion." Watching the staff officer and Luo Guang walk away, the angry soldier looked at his teammates and waited for them to give him a reasonable explanation, otherwise he wouldn't mind letting his teammates feel his anger for a while. "This is the staff's plan." The man had a look on his face that I had already seen the second level, and expressed his guess, "You also know how loyal the staff are, so first of all, rule out the possibility of the staff uniting with outsiders, and it is so easy for outsiders to join us." "No, then can you explain why the staff officer took that person down there?" "This is for our sake. This enemy is very powerful, but if he is below, he will lose the space to deal with us. At the same time, there are seniors below, so they will not be killed so easily. The angry man was stunned for a moment. After being explained by his teammates, he finally understood the counselor's good intentions and felt sorry for misunderstanding his counselor. With shame on his face, he looked at the place where the counselor left and lowered his head. Meow meow, thank you for voting me out. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 166. Chapter 162 Confrontation. Under the leadership of the staff officer, Luo Guang came to the basement of the Prime Minister's office without any obstacles. Compared with the previous situation, the guns of the people guarding the basement were pointed at the direction where Luo Guang and the fat staff officer came from, that is, the direction from the ground. The staff officer also knew that he would be shot to pieces if he went down rashly, so he shouted the secret code and turned the flashlight on and off to signal. The people in the basement received the order and threw a green fluorescent stick to the stairs to indicate safety. With the leadership of the staff officer, although many people were confused, they all choked on their words. At this time, all the lights in the underground fortress had been turned on, but many lights could no longer be lit due to disrepair, so the corridor of the underground fortress was not too bright. But it was good this way, the darkness covered the rust on the wall, barely maintaining the afterglow of the Prussian Third Reich. With the fat staff officer leading the way, Luo Guang finally had a clearer understanding of the terrain and path of this underground fortress. First of all, the map provided by General Belt is basically wrong. Only the telegraph room that Luo Guang has entered and a few peripheral spaces are correct, and other places are completely wrong. In fact, except for the front part of the underground fortress, the back is like a stack of bicycle tires lying flat on top of each other, and the entire fortress is connected by the central elevator and stairs. It is a veritable underground fortress. Under the introduction of the baby fat staff, Luo Guang understood that the power supply of this underground fortress is actually divided into two parts. The first power supply depends on the geothermal generator and energy storage power supply at the bottom of the underground fortress. The second is to rely on Germany's own power supply system. As long as Berlin is not disconnected from the power supply, this underground fortress can always maintain sufficient power supply for those researchers to conduct various experiments day and night. Until Luo Guang followed the baby fat staff and listened carefully to the other party's introduction when there was no one else. On the way, Luo Guang and the others also met many people. They were those World War II zombies, wearing the clothes of the D-Guard, which were no different from what Luo Guang had seen before, but there were some differences from what Luo Guang had seen. If the ones he saw before were still considered human, then the World War II zombies he saw now must be another species. These World War II zombies look very thin, and can be described as skinny. From their necks and palms, which are exposed, they are basically skin and bones. There is not much flesh on their cheeks, which are sunken. The skin is white and even a little transparent. The most important thing is that the eyes of these World War II zombies are cloudy white, but there is a slight blue light in the center of the eyeball. As for why there is such a difference, the baby fat staff officer is not clear. General Belt basically won't tell them about the eternal virus. The World War II zombies here saw Luo Guang wearing a mask behind the baby fat staff officer, and they felt very strange. Unlike the people in the Prime Minister's office, these World War II zombies have a lot of experience. Not to mention the military rank, just take the seniority, the baby fat staff officer is very respectful to them. So these World War II zombies enthusiastically called the baby fat staff officer and asked about the origin of Luo Guang behind him. Fortunately, the name of General Belt is useful enough. He is now the top leader of the World War II zombies, and the chubby staff officer who is Belt's staff officer has a higher rank and position than these World War II zombies, so these World War II zombies immediately make way as soon as they hear the chubby staff officer say that he is the person General Belt needs. Although it was a little troublesome, Luo Guang finally arrived at the door of the underground fortress command center where General Belt was located without any danger. Hamas. A brown-haired staff officer just came out of the room, closed the door and prepared to go to carry out the task assigned by Belt, but was surprised to see his friend and comrade in arms leave his post without reporting to the command center of the fortress, and directly brought in a stranger with a weapon. "Who is the person behind you, guard?" The brown-haired staff officer was about to shout to the two guards guarding the door to take Luo Guang down, but since Luo Guang had already come to where Belt was, there was no need for him to hide anything, because he would soon face Belt, and by then Hamas's staff identity would be useless. So Luo Guang naturally would not give them a chance to disarm, and immediately used the Beretta M92F pistol with a silencer to kill the two guards and the brown-haired staff officer. Although the gunshots were still loud with the silencer, and an iron door would not isolate all the sounds, the silencer also had another function, which was to affect the judgment of the location of the gunshots, and could slightly delay the time for people from far away in the underground fortress to come to the rescue. The gunshots were also heard in the underground fortress command center, and the people inside immediately reacted, took out the weapons on their waists, and looked outside the door vigilantly. But then they were surprised to see that the person who pushed the door in was actually their familiar comrade in arms, the staff officer Hamas with a little baby fat on his face, and the brown-haired staff officer and two eternal warriors who fell in a pool of blood behind the two who came in. Unlike Luo Guang's name, those soldiers infected with the eternal virus became eternal warriors or predecessors in the mouths of Belt and others. Luo Guang followed staff officer Hamas in, closed and locked the door, then stood behind staff officer Hamas and watched their show. In fact, there were some snacks, chocolates, and other food in the backpack behind Luo Guang, but under the current situation, it would be too arrogant to take it out and watch a show at the same time, so Luo Guang did not do such a thing. This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. Looking inside the house, Luo Guang confirmed the situation. There were 3 people under General Belt. In addition to Staff Officer Hamas and the brown-haired staff officer, there was also a blonde staff officer named Murphy. At this time, he was holding a Ruger P08 pistol in his hand and pointed it at Luo. Light. In addition to Belt and Murphy, there was a silver-haired World War II zombie in the command room of the underground fortress. From the time Luo Guang came in until now, the World War II zombie had no reaction, but Luo Guang saw that the World War II zombie was wearing a field marshal uniform of the Prussian Third Reich. "Hamas, have you betrayed me?" The golden Ruger pistol in Belt's hand was pointed at Luo Guang behind Hamas. His face looked very sad. Anger and sadness were mixed in his tone, and every word was accented. "General Bird, what are you talking about? How could I betray you?" Staff Officer Hamas did not find it strange or inappropriate because Luo Guang killed the brown-haired staff officer and the 2 World War II zombies infected by the eternal virus. On the contrary, after seeing the reaction of Bert and the others, he was very surprised as to why General Bert was so vigilant and said such hurtful words to himself, even though he was obviously the most loyal of the 3 staff officers. Bert didn't see any trace of acting on Hamas' face, and he even heard sad feelings in Hamas' words. This made General Belt realize that something was wrong. The Hamas he knew did not have such powerful acting skills. If Hamas's attitude and words gave him an indescribable strange feeling, then the people who came in behind Hamas gave General Bert a sense of crisis. These 2 feelings are not Belt's illusions, but an ability brought to him by the eternal virus, the perception of murderous intent, or something else. Anyway, for Belt, this kind of inexplicable ability is sometimes save his life, or let him avoid some risks in advance. There is no final conclusion on the principle. Researchers from the underground fortress who have been studying the eternal virus have discovered that not all eternal creatures will acquire this ability. In the end, the researchers put forward a hypothesis about this ability in their report to Belt, that is, the eternal virus observes the surrounding environment through the host and is able to keenly detect subtle changes in the environment, thus causing some crystallization of the eternal virus. The resulting slight toxicity will make the host feel uncomfortable, eventually causing the host to feel uneasy. Just as Bert was thinking about the meaning behind this feeling of uneasiness, Staff Officer Murphy could not help but speak. Judging from the situation of the fallen people, Staff Officer Murphy already understood where the bullets that accompanied the gunshots were, so he raised his gun and stretched forward, saying angrily, "Then why are you attacking our friends, and the ancestors shot them? Were you not touched at all? Morphil, it's indeed a pity that they sacrificed their lives, but it's not my fault, right? It's because they were disrespectful to the people I tried so hard to persuade to surrender that they aroused other people's resentment. You go to a strange environment. Suddenly someone wants to take it down. As a hot-blooded soldier, do you want to surrender directly? Then there is no need for him to kill them directly. And there is no such thing as surrendering by killing them at the slightest disagreement." Morphil did not believe that Luo Guang came to surrender, and Hamas' words were also full of unreasonableness. This is not like what Hamas would say. He has great abilities, but naturally he has a bad temper. Don't be so stingy and be patient. Soon we will all be comrades. After all, such a powerful talent will be of great use to our plan. With his fighting ability, one person can it's stronger than the combined number of people who just died at the door, so this deal is a sure win. Staff Officer Murphy was about to explode with anger at what Staff Officer Hamas said, so he moved the muzzle of his gun from Luo Guang to Staff Officer Hamas. "Who is he?" Bert stared at Luo Guang and asked again. Whatever the reason, Belt could at least confirm that the masked man who came in later was the source of his uneasiness, so he needed more information about the masked man in front of him. Staff Officer Hamas was not afraid. He felt that General Bert would make the decision for him. He introduced to Luo Guang behind him. This respected king recommended himself after hearing about what happened in Berlin. In order to prove his ability, he broke through the siege alone and successfully reached the temporary command center above. Luo Guang had never told Hanmas his name, so Hanmas could not say Luo Guang's name, but Hanmas naturally said Luo Guang's position in his mind. This is because in the hierarchy of organisms infected by the T-Virilica virus, Luo Guang is the king of Hamas. Bert and the others knew that someone was attacking the Prime Minister's office, but they never expected that the other party's reason would be this, and there were many problems in his words. "Have you heard about what happened in Berlin? Has this matter already spread to the outside world?" Staff Officer Murphy asked quickly. As the saying goes, family scandals should not be made public. They have blocked the signals from various embassies and even controlled those people in the name of investigating spies. The ambassadors of various countries were still making a fuss, but after seeing the soldiers search the embassy of the lighthouse country for various spy equipment and information, they had nothing to say. It is worth mentioning that a certain country quickly started the program and burned all important documents before being controlled. "No, I am a gang member," Luo Guang interjected, and his voice was a little dull because he was wearing a mask. Everyone said with surprise on their faces, "Gang." Staff Officer Hamas had asked Luo Guang about some situations on the way, so Staff Officer Hamas took over and said, "Yes, he is a member of the local gang in Berlin." "How can ordinary people know what happened here? How can they know our plan?" Murphy raised questions as soon as he heard it. "They have not announced high-profile opposition to the government, so ordinary gangs cannot know such things and are so bold to raid the Prime Minister's office. This is obviously very illogical, which Luo Guang's statement can understand at a glance, but Staff Officer Hamas did not notice it at all, and at the same time he solved a doubt in his mind. Well, because their gang has its own channels, and our men didn't keep secrets when discussing things, so they leaked things out in a few words. Impossible, our men are soldiers, not those gossipers. Staff Officer Murphy was not convinced, and it was impossible to be convinced. Murphy had already made a judgment that Hamas was his enemy, and he hadn't shot yet just because General Belt hadn't issued an order, and he was not sure he could kill the masked man behind Hamas. A wise man can make mistakes even if he thinks 1,000 times. We can trust him, but how can we, the people in command, know the truth? Hearing what Staff Officer Hamas said, Murphy wanted to refute that the masked man couldn't contact his soldiers and continue to argue to delay time, but as soon as he opened his mouth, General Belt spoke first. "That's enough, Murphy. Although I don't know what happened, I can be sure that something must have happened to Hamas. It's like he was hypnotized and couldn't listen to us at all. And didn't you hear what Hamas called that mysterious masked man just now? King." Murphy understood that even Belt was only called a general by Hamas, and there was no content in their plan to dominate the king. Belt just wanted to be a role like prime minister, not a king. Belt only interrupted at this time because he felt that the time was about right. After hearing the gunshots, the other people in the underground bunker should have finished gathering by now and were waiting for the opportunity outside the door. The problem was how he could survive the upcoming exchange of fire. Thank you for your votes. O equals mathematical intersection symbol omega mathematical intersection symbol equals M.